Good evening to everyone. So we'd like to thank you for coming. This is our second of two town hall meetings in regards to gather input from the community, citizens of Caldwell regarding the West Valley Humane Society contract that we currently have, and best paths forward in regards to that of working together. And again, finding solutions is the key on that. So we do appreciate you being here. We did hold another one of these meetings on, where's our clerk so I can get this date right? It would have been June 17th, I believe, at this same place. And so this again is our second one that we did hold to ensure that we had the opportunity to hear from the public on that. So we did hear from a number of people at our first town hall. And so this is for those that were not able to speak at the first town hall meeting that we had, to provide you all with opportunities to come and address the council in that regards. And again, we look forward to that. So we will begin. We do have the sign-up sheet on that. So we're going to do the same process as we did on the last one. So we appreciate all of your input, and those that do want to speak that weren't able to at the first one, we'll provide you that opportunity tonight. But where this does have a direct impact on the taxpayers of the city of Caldwell, we will allow for those residents to speak first, and then we'll go into those others that are here that wish to speak that live outside of the Caldwell city limits. And yeah, we're just again excited for that. We do ask that you please, so you'll need to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. So you will have a timer that'll be up on the wall that you'll note. And so after you give your name and address, that's when that time will start. So please do be aware of that. We have a number of people signed up in that regard. So we will hold strictly to that 3 minute time limit. So if you do see your time running out, make sure you start to wrap that up. You'll hear a timer, a beep go off at the end of your 3 minutes, and then the microphone will shut off shortly after that. So do please keep your comments to that 3 minutes in that regards. And before we do begin this evening, and again, just lastly on that before we do proceed is please do keep your comments focused on the subject at hand. We appreciated the first meeting we had was extremely respectful, and we appreciated those that were in attendance and the way that they spoke, and they also gave some great suggestions and possible solutions for us to look at, so we appreciate that as well. So again, this is, we understand everybody here loves their animals, and so we appreciate that. The same could be said for all the members up here on the council, and so I would recommend to stay focused on the issue at hand, your concerns on that, and then possible solutions, so you can make sure to stay within your 3 minute time frame in that regards. And with that, before we do begin, as you all are aware, there is very tragic events that took place yesterday in northern Idaho. And since we are gathered this evening, the day after that, we would like to take a moment of silence and just an opportunity to reflect on that tragedy, and also reflect on the brave men and women that serve us through our fire departments and other services in that regard. So if you please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you so much for doing that. And again, please keep those family members, those that are injured, in your prayers. It's not what you expect to happen on the beginning of any shift, whether you're a firefighter, a police officer, or any of our trusted law enforcement individuals out there. So thank you for their service. So with that, we are going to begin. We do appreciate, so our gracious Chief Ingram has invited the Middleton Police Chief here this evening as well, as they have kind of experienced a similar issue in the past, and so wanted to get some feedback from him. So we appreciate him taking the time to be here this evening. We will begin Chief Smith, if I get the name correct, which I think is good.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to mispronounce that one.
Get my kids' names wrong, so I'm glad I got yours right. So we'll give you some time on that, and then also we'll proceed with questions from council after you're finished, if that's all right.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you so much, Chief. The time is yours. Go. Yep.
I didn't realize that was the invitation. So, yeah, I'm here on behalf of the city of Middleton at the request of Chief Ingram. We've crossed a bridge that you guys are approaching, and he just thought that my perspective might be useful to you. So we started our own kennel program 18 months ago, and I have statistics from 17 months of those that I thought you might find interesting. Now I understand that Caldwell's a much larger city, so I don't expect raw numbers to be anywhere close to one another relative to Middleton, but proportionality is kind of the perspective I think I might be able to offer. So in those 17 months, we have taken in 82 dogs, and of those, 71 have been rehomed, and of those 71, 67 have gone back to their original owners. So we've been able to rehome 87% of our dogs, and 94% of that 87% have gone back to the original owners. So we've been able to reunite families with their loved ones, their pets, right? So that leaves 11 dogs in 17 months that we've had to enlist the services of Idaho Humane Society. So that's only 13% of our intakes. Other than that, we house them for the 5 days. We have an agreement with IHS that they will come out and transport the animal. We hold them for the minimum time required. And then if they're still there at the end of that waiting period, then IHS is tapped out, basically. The one thing I'd like to note is in that 17 months, like I said, we only had 11 dogs. 6 of those 11 happened in our first 3 months because we were still kind of experiencing a bit of a learning curve. And we kind of took to social media, and that really kind of exploded. And that's how we have had such great success in reuniting the families, basically, with their loved ones, their pets. So again, six of those dogs were in the first 3 months, and in the last, what does that leave, 14 months, we've only had five instances where we've had to utilize the services of IHS. So it's pretty good numbers. The cost of the initial build was about $4,500. And you have animal control here in this city, we do not, so most of our officers are tasked with that. But to be honest with you, the burden has not been as great as I feared it might be. It does take some time, but then again, driving to a shelter also does. So in that regard, the kennels that we built are right on site at our public works facility, so it saves our officers time. They don't have to drive, to and from a shelter. So for us, now you guys are a lot closer, but for us, that was one of the great, I guess, unanticipated benefits that we didn't really realize that we were going to receive. And because, with one of our officers, they'd be out of the city for probably an hour and 15 to an hour and 30 minutes. And this keeps them in town full time. And when you have as little staff as we do, that's really important.
Very good. Excellent. Any questions from council for Chief Smith? Yes, Councilor
Yeah,
Stoddard.
Mr. Mayor, Chief, when you say homed, is that original owners or is that people who want the dogs? How do you separate that?
So most of them, 87% have gone back to their own, 87% have been rehomed. Of that, 94% have gone back to their original homes. So we've only rehomed 4 dogs. We worked with our city attorney to draft an agreement with if we're going to go into the adoption phase. We'd have to have an interested party. They have to understand the waiting period is required, and they'd have to sign a liability waiver, things of that nature. But we've only actually rehomed a total of 4 dogs to new owners during that 17-month period.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Allgood.
Yeah, Chief, thank you for being here.
Certainly.
Do you allow the public to bring you dogs, or are these only dogs that your officers encounter on calls?
So as a general rule, we don't take surrenders except for in exceptional circumstances, and that's sort of like a case-by-case basis. But generally speaking, we don't take surrenders.
Okay.
So it's dogs that would be called in as at-large, and we would encounter them in the field typically.
Do you have a vet retained to help you in injured dog situations?
Yeah, we don't have one on retainer, but we have a vet that we use in town.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor.
I appreciate that. Okay, so, and again, you will have 3 minutes when you come forward, so please do recognize the time up there. Then again, you will hear a beep at the end, and then shortly after that, the microphone will turn off. So we do ask you to respect that 3 minutes and wrap your comments up for that time. And then also, this is for those that are here to speak. So if you have a written statement of your own, you're more than welcome to read that. However, if you do have a written statement from someone that was not able to be here, we would just ask you that to not read that and just provide that to our city clerk, and we'll make sure there's copies made for the city council members. Okay. Then we will begin. So we will start with, again, with the residents within Caldwell city limits, and Tammy Dittenber is the first one on that list. So Tammy, if you please come forward. Again, if you could just state your name and address, so we have that, and then you will have the 3 minutes.
My name is Tammy Dittenber. I live at 2220 Arlington Avenue, Caldwell. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I hope to just share some basic information related to shelter funding and the state of overall animal welfare in the city of Caldwell. First, there's no doubt in my mind that the shelter needs the money they're asking for in order to keep their doors open. The model of expecting a relatively few donors, rescuers, advocates, grantors, and volunteers to sustain a service to the masses is a failing model. Fickle pet acquisition is a serious issue in our community. It is exacerbated by poor city ordinances in both Nampa and Caldwell regarding puppy mills, little to no enforcement of licensing or chipping, puppies being sold out of parking lots with nothing but a sign and a Sharpie marker, and housing instability. Changing the community culture around pet acquisition, care, vaccination, chipping, licensing, and realistic commitment takes a concerted effort by leaders and advocates. We have to say hard things and consider them animal service announcements. What leaders of profits know is that once it's public that they are hemorrhaging funds because municipal partners are not stepping up, every private donor shuts down. Every private donorship, every corporate donorship closes. Animal shelters do not run on well wishes and prayers or hard work. They run on money and they run on passion. No nonprofit animal welfare advocate wants to stand before a governing body and be treated poorly. And if you want to know why funding crisis caught agencies off guard, that is why, because it only takes one agency to treat someone poorly for them not to go back. Canyon County has not increased its dollar amount funding to the shelter since 2011. The total county budget has doubled in that time. I think that alone might be indicative of a serious issue, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Any questions? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Next on our list is now Donald Davis had indicated to not speak. Is that correct, Mr. Davis? Okay, thank you so much. And same for, again, just want to make sure so we don't miss anybody. Sarah Waters had also indicated to not speak. Is that correct? Okay. So next that did indicate, Lynn Krog? If you could please correct. There we go. We got there. Okay. So again, if you could just state your name and address, and then after that you'll have 3 minutes as well.
My name is Lynn Crow, and I live at 911 East Ash Street in Caldwell. And first off, I'd like to thank all of you for your service and your time and your attention to this matter. I am a donor and a volunteer at West Valley. The folks there do an absolutely heroic job of trying to meet the needs of the community with regard to animals, not just animal control issues, but abandoned animals, injured animals, food pantry assistance for people who've been dislocated, all kinds of animal control issues. They do a masterful job of trying to make our tax dollars go as absolutely far as possible by supplementing it with volunteers and donations. But they are providing a service that is essential to our community. And the needs for their services have grown exponentially, just as our population has grown exponentially. And they're an essential part of our community. They're an essential part of our civic community obligations. And it's our obligation to support them because we need them. They're part of us, they're part of our community. And so I just wanted to say that I hope very much that you will support their funding request. It's reasonable in relation to the growth. It is reasonable in relation to inflation. It's reasonable in relation, actually far less than what we need in terms of a community, because there are other nonprofits also trying to meet the need. But they're the ones we primarily rely on them, and we need them, we need their support, and they need ours. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Scott Tillman. So again, if you could just state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Sure. Scott Tillamont, 4520 Equinox Avenue, Caldwell. Mr. Mayor, Council, I do not envy your position. The last meeting, and probably here, you will hear a lot about what we could do to mitigate what is occurring. But I believe the real question is, do we have the money to do it? Do we want to spend $500,000 that we really kind of don't have? Currently, I think this year, after sitting through budget meetings, actually listening to what we have, we could probably come up with it. The issue becomes going forward. Realistically, you would love to only see a 2% increase. It'll probably be closer to 3 to 5. Ongoing, can we support that? With the budget constraints that we have coming from the state, the more and more that we've been restricted on where we can get income from, it starts to become a question. And to me, I think that is the true question, not whether we want to have the Humane Society here. I would think we all do. It becomes a level of service question. What is the level that we can afford? And I love that the chief from Middleton came in. Right now, I think setting something like that up would probably take us 6 to 8 months realistically to try to set up a program, set up a system with our police to do a level of service that they have. I don't know if we have the time to do that. So the biggest question is, do we want to go with a 1-year plan, fund it for this year, and see where we sit? What can we get in revenue? What can we do in mitigating factors? I don't envy your position. I wouldn't want to be in this vote because it's a no-win either way. Either we're going to be extremely tight in our budget, and it's going to make it extremely hard for other services, or we're going to upset a lot of people because our level of service is going to go down. And I think that's the true question and the thing you have to decide. Like I said, at this point, I think we can get through for a year and then see what kinds of things we could come up with as a city. But I don't know. I think we really need to think, and even the people that are out sending in information or even speaking need to speak to the fact that this is about a budget issue. We all want better humane societies. I would love to see them get a lot more than this. But there's a reality factor. That's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Emily Gamble had signed up. It said not to not speak, so I just want to ensure, Emily, that that's correct. Okay, thank you. Jeffrey Larimore. And if you could state your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes as well.
Jeffrey Larimore, 5505 Junegrass Way. My situation, whatever solution you come up with, you've got to start taking care of cats. I had a cat dropped off at my house a week and a half ago, and that's when I found out, since it was healthy, no one would take it. Not the city, not the county, not the Humane Society, nobody. Luckily, I used social media and found the owner. I'm good at that. But whatever solution we give them up with, like Chief did, I don't know if they handle cats. If they don't handle cats, that's not a full solution for this city. Because this guy stole a cat from his neighbor, dropped off in my yard, found out. That's happening all the time. If I got a dog problem, they're there in a heartbeat. The ladies you got doing animal control, they're great. Love them. See them all the time, unfortunately. But yeah, we got it. Whatever plan, you got to take healthy cats. Okay? Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Appreciate that feedback. Gina Bosco. And again, if you state your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Bosco, 4003 Preston Avenue in Caldwell. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to comment regarding the animal shelter situation. I would like to offer my comments from the perspective of being a longtime owner of rescue animals, an intermittent volunteer at West Valley Humane Society, a former board member at West Valley Humane Society, and a freelance rescuer currently. I know you have not yet shared your thoughts on what the potential options are for what the city would do if we came out of the shelter. And so that's where my concern is what are we looking at if we don't use the shelter? And so just to state the obvious, there needs to be a building or a facility. We need staff to take care of animals. We need a reception point of contact for the public. We need veterinary care, disposal of euthanized animals. We need tech support for a database, which I know has always been a challenge for the shelter. Proper staffing for the care of held animals just throughout the week, 7 days a week we're talking. And most importantly, the knowledge base for how to run an effective shelter, because that's not something that just is, put together on the run. And then my other question is, we've had trouble finding lifeguards for the city pool. How would it work to find staff for the shelter or whatever venue we have for these animals? I mean, there needs to be people to do it. So I think of this as building a house. I mean, say you decide to build your house, you decide to build your own house because you don't like the cost of the houses on the market. Does that mean you can do a better job, or at least as good a job as the experienced house builder? Does that mean that you are going to build a house simply based on a budget without regard for quality? And what do you do if you decide this isn't working and you want to step away from this project that you started? I mean, what happens then? I did a little bit of research from an AI standpoint just about why the Canyon County turned over the sheltering of animals to a nonprofit. And what I found was that according to an AI search, this decision likely stemmed from financial difficulties and resource constraints the county faced in operating the shelter. By allowing a nonprofit to take over, the county aimed to reduce its direct financial responsibility and potentially leverage a wider range of funding resources, such as private donations and grants, that are typically more accessible to nonprofit organizations. So the county left this project because they couldn't afford it, is what I'm getting at. While clearly the shelter has faced serious management issues in the past, it is important to note that there has been a need for the right people in the right place at the right time for the shelter. The current administrative team brings the right amount of sheltering and fiscal knowledge to allow for WVHS to survive and to provide our services. My deepest fear is that the city will take over an animal shelter service and that we will return to a high-kill shelter era. And by that, I mean a shelter that just euthanizes for space because they've held their animals for as long as they can and then they have to kill them. And that's a deplorable situation.
That is your time. So thank you so much, Gina. We do appreciate that. It was great information. Julie Warwick. And Julie, if you could state your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes as well.
You bet. Julie Warwick, 107 South 13th Avenue. I didn't time this, so we'll see how it goes. My daughter and I volunteered at the shelter years ago when it was run by the county. We didn't do it for long. Dogs died on a daily basis then. We certainly don't want to go back to that. Most municipal shelters do not strive to be a place that works to find dogs home if their owners are not found. But once a nonprofit steps in, things generally improve for the animals that find their way there. We want West Valley to continue to be a nonprofit that looks out for the best interests of the animals. To do this, they need the support from all of us. I understand their ask of $540,000 is a huge leap from what we've been paying. I swallowed hard when I heard it, just like all of you guys did. But if we want an animal shelter we can be proud of and treats the animals like they're not just a problem to be dealt with, we're going to have to bite the bullet. The presentation that Tyler from the shelter gave a month ago was pretty thorough and laid out why they need this type of increase. The folks that work there deserve to make a living wage, and the animals deserve the best care. They didn't ask to wind up there. As you may have figured, I'm an animal lover. I also volunteer as an admin on the largest lost and found pet page on Facebook, 208 Lost and Found Pets. We've got over 53,000 members and more joining on a daily basis. Some folks post pets that they have lost and others post pets they have found. Many times the two come together and pets get home without animal control or the shelter ever having to become involved. That's a win for everyone. But often when someone finds a pet they can't hang on to until an owner is found, we always advise them that the shelter is the best place to take it because that's the first place owners will look. Conversely, if folks don't know about the community pages online, they will take a found pet there so the owners can find it. I heard the number that was given by animal control as the number of dogs they took to the shelter, and I totally believe that number. But I can say confidently that more members of the public take pets to the shelter than are picked up by animal control. I know that because I'm one of the people that picks up animals and tries to find their owners and then takes them to the shelter. I trust the shelter's numbers when they say a large number of these dogs come from Caldwell. I see it online every single day. Let's not fool ourselves into thinking that Caldwell doesn't contribute a good share of dogs to the population at the shelter. And cats don't even seem to count. The stray and feral cat problem in all of Canning County is epidemic, and the local nonprofits that deal with cats are overwhelmed and exhausted because West Valley doesn't take cats unless it's an emergency. Funding needs to be available to help curtail this problem by any means possible. I know $540,000 is a huge number, but the population of Caldwell has grown enormously. The amount of support the shelter receives from the city has not. If we conservatively estimate the population of Caldwell at $70,000, that's $7.71 a person. I, for one, am willing to pay that. Please find a way to support the shelter in the way that it deserves to be supported. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much, Julie. Appreciate that. Jordan Slater signed up but to not speak. Is that correct, Jordan? Okay. And then Elizabeth Smart had signed up but did not indicate whether or not wanted to speak. No? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we did have one other that did sign up that does live in city limits but was able to speak at the last one, so we're going to go to those that live outside, and if time permitting, we will come back to those that spoke at the prior town hall meeting. So with that, we will move to residents, those here that live outside the city limits who do wish to address the council. Maria Lyman, I believe? No? Okay. Jean? So if you could state your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes as well.
Good evening, Jean Kreitbring. Thanks for offering this opportunity to hear the citizens concerning West Valley. First and foremost, I truly and honestly feel we need an animal shelter, especially given the exponential growth and development. The city has spent frivolously in the past. However, I do have concerns about West Valley. As a responsible person, I have a budget and watch my intake and expenses carefully. I'm truly wondering why West Valley hasn't acted responsibly. They should have been watching their intake and expenses for years. Why are they all of a sudden pinning the city's backs against the walls? What guarantee do you have that they will be fiscally responsible with the money as they haven't been physically responsible to this point? Several thoughts and ideas, in no particular order, but some things to consider or ponder possibly. 1, if they knew their sponsorship was going to run out, why didn't they have fundraisers or apply for grants? 2, with the support of animal lovers, I'm positive we could have annual fundraisers to support an animal shelter. 3, grants need to be applied for immediately. 4, there needs to be some sort of accountability and audit if money is given to them. A monthly checks and balance concerning their operations needs to be thoroughly laid out. Some sort of contract where you pay monthly. If they don't acquiesce to the contract, the money stops. 5, specifically concerning an audit, there needs to be a true assessment of their fees charged. 6, perhaps a new organization needs to take over, a clean slate. We do need a shelter. You just can't shutter West Valley and not have a plan in place. That could be disastrous for the health and well-being of the pet population and the safety of the citizens. 7, I'd suggest partnering with SNPs in Meridian to complete all the spay and neuters. SNPs only deals with spay and neutering animals at a discounted price. 8, work with vets to have all dogs and cats licensed and chipped. It should not be only pets within city limits. It should be all, as I suggested to you via email. That would bring in more money. 9, this may be far-fetched, but Could animal control carry a chip reader to alleviate a step and get the animal back to its owner in a quicker manner, and issue a citation for animal at large at the same time? Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Gene. And I do believe that they do carry those wands. I don't know if they fine when they take them there. Maybe Chief Ingram can.
Mr. Mayor, they do. Thank you. They
Okay.
do.
So I just want to make sure that was clear that they do that. So, okay. Thank you so much, Gene. Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
could we have Gene make a copy of that for the clerk so we can all have a copy of it?
Yeah. Is that all right, Gene? So, okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. Next, I believe it is Dell Withrick. Looks like DAYL, I think, at the end. On Ustick Road, 6700 West Ustick. Do you mind coming forward you did not want to speak? Okay, correct. Thank you so much. And then also May McGowan was the same, did not wish to speak, correct? Okay, Jeff Smith. Oh.
I have my turn.
Okay, Chief Smith, so, very good. He follows directions very well. Well done, Chief. So, and then there's a number that it signed up, basically just to show that they were here but did not speak. Maddie Kuntz, Dee Whalen, and Kim Pence did not want to speak. Is that correct? Okay. And then Jeff Rosenthal indicated that you did want to speak. And again, if you could state your name and address and then the 3 minutes.
My name's Jeff Rosenthal, 3738 Norfolk Way, Boise, Idaho. For 25 years, I've been the CEO of the Idaho Humane Society. When I started at IHS, we had a contract with Ada County and Boise City, and now we contract with every single community in Ada County, and we have a $3.4 million animal control budget every year that is allocated among these communities based on usage, performance measures. Meridian went through a similar deliberation that you are doing a number of years ago. They had their own animal shelter. They shut it down. They contracted with us because it made financial sense. It was fiscally, literally irresponsible for them to keep running their own operation because it was going to be much more expensive. The truth is that running an animal shelter mostly involves fixed costs. There are incremental costs with more animals handled, but they're a lot smaller than you might think. That's why, even though it seems like the city of Boise is paying a lot at about $1.7 million a year, if I only had them as a contractor and was only providing sheltering services for them, the cost would probably go up $1 million more per year to keep the shelter open. The reason I'm saying this is that it is very important for you to be, the most important thing, it would be great if you continued to work with the West Valley Humane Society as we've provided these services as well in Ada County successfully and follow that model. That would be a good thing. The cost per capita is very reasonable when you look at your peer communities, but most importantly, you need to work with your other communities in Canyon County, in particular Nampa, the county, the other municipalities. If Nampa doesn't fund, it doesn't matter what you fund, that shelter is closing. In June of last year, the Idaho Humane Society had to step in and mitigate a situation in that shelter that was dire. We were heading towards a major animal welfare catastrophe in that shelter. We spent about $80,000 of our funds turning this around. Outside organizations like Best Friends spent much more. We've provided this county a lifeline. We've got things back on track. We're no longer involved in the day-to-day over there at that shelter. It is very important that this shelter remain operational. It has a massive impact in Ada County if we don't have the second largest animal shelter in the state functioning, and we have all these scores of people from Canyon County trying to come to my doorstep and have my organization take care of what is this county's responsibility. We're very proud to help out the other communities. We continue to help out the Caldwell or the Canyon County shelter. But we just need to have funding at a reasonable level. I think this per capita cost is eminently reasonable. I think if you really do the math, for a city of your size, it's not going to work out in the long run. I realize this all comes as a shock to the system because all of a sudden things have changed and you're looking at this huge increase. The city of Boise has had since 1941 when we...
Go ahead and wrap up that last thought.
But I think you need to just have the realization that you're going to have to fund basically what all your peer communities fund.
Very good, thank you. I do have a question if nobody else does. Does any counselors have a, Counselor Allgood?
Yes, sir. This is our second meeting, and at both meetings, there's been a lot of discussion about cats. How does Ada County deal with the cat issue?
We deal with cats the same way we deal with dogs. Our contract covers both. So we bring in stray cats just like we bring in stray dogs. Some of the communities, when we first started contracting with them, they only had a dog program, so it was very attractive for them to then start to care for cats, because cats are always what you hear at city council meetings. You hear one person complain about dogs and 20 people complain about cats. So we handle stray cats. We enforce animal welfare ordinances regarding cats. We have a very robust return to field program, which is just a way of returning spayed and neutered feral cats to decrease the population. Obviously, much of this is funded by the Humane Society itself through donations. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. I guess I said that, Boise's cost would probably double if we didn't have the other communities. But if they weren't working with a nonprofit, it would probably be more like $4 to $5 million if you look at their peer communities. So this can work. It's worked in Ada County for many decades. And sure, I get up in front of councils like you every year at budget time and we scrap. And we do that thing. But in the end, we all come together. I think these meetings are incredibly important, obviously. You know that, and I commend you for having these town hall meetings. But you need to get in the same room with these other partners. A joint powers agreement should be considered. Even if you don't sign something like that, even if that makes you uncomfortable, the program needs to run like that. It's a consolidated program. This is in your best interest. Even if you decide to not work with a nonprofit, you're crazy not to work with the other communities. This will not, there are economies of scale. Middleton is not Caldwell, which is not Nampa, it's not Boise. You're beyond that, unfortunately. It would be great to just do this on next door, but it's not going to work for you.
Councilor Register?
Yeah, thank you for coming. I just had a question. I guess it is. You mentioned a situation that was dire at the shelter. How long ago was that, and was it with this organization that's there right now?
Yeah, so a point was made is why didn't West Valley do X, Y, and Z? The truth is that you're actually dealing with a brand new Humane Society from my perspective. To my knowledge, literally no one in any kind of a management, administrative, or board position is still involved with that organization. Basically, a new organization has essentially been created from scratch, luckily with some holdover community support and donors, but that was June, basically. It was very difficult. The things were not going well, to say the least. And I would just encourage you to understand that it's basically a brand new organization you're dealing with. The problem is, frankly, is if you were going out and recruiting a contractor right now for an animal shelter and sending out an RFP, the issue with the West Valley Humane Society at the moment, because of their situation, is they have no reserve funds. So every year, budgeting is an educated guess. Some things go well, some things go not so well. In my situation, some years we get it dialed in and we're good at the end of the year. Most years we run some level of deficit. Every once in a while we have a little margin. I think the problem with the West Valley Humane Society and the reason you're going to have to be more involved for a while, without those reserve funds, they can't weather any kind of an issue, basically. You guys fund and they have some unexpected expense, they're in trouble, because to my knowledge, and I don't have day-to-day, intimate, or even monthly understanding of their financials at the moment, but from my understanding is they have minimal reserve funds, and that's tough for a contractor, because we have, at Idaho Humane Society, we have diversified revenue streams. We have an endowment, we have rainy day funds, we have resources, we have other income streams. I can deal with the fact that an animal control contract can run a loss some years. I'm grateful for the animal control contracts when we have difficult economic circumstances, then donations fall, because it's a stabilizer and it pays for overhead, so it works for us. That's kind of what I've got to say.
Thank you. And I have a question for when the West Valley comes up and speaks, but you kind of touched on it. I don't know for sure, I haven't heard anything official, but the rumblings that I've heard is that Nampa is probably not going to do this. I don't know that, again, it's just rumor at this point. So if they don't, you said if they don't, the shelter's done, is that, so this could all be
That's my
for naught?
fear, because like I said, your costs are fixed. It costs a certain amount to run that building. And the truth is, and it may seem strange to you, but from my perspective, I mean, obviously, it's more expensive to house 2,000 animals versus 1,000 animals. But if you basically are doing that in the same space and with the same number of employees that it takes, which is, you can do that in a shelter, that's what it takes. So everybody's going to have to be funding, and that's why I sort of made that point. The more folks that are sharing costs, the better this is for everybody.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just thinking that we may have to come up with a plan B anyway if they decide not to do that.
There are different ways of doing this. Every community is a bit different. Minidoka Shelter is a joint powers agreement. All the local towns, it's government run, and they all combine together. Pocatello does it alone, unfortunately. The county does not contribute very much to that shelter. As a result, they have the highest per capita animal sheltering expense in the state by far. It's literally, it's something like 4 to 5 times mine because they have to do it alone. These are cautionary tales and learning opportunities. I urge you to reach out to some of these other cities and ask them how they're doing things.
Do you contract outside of Ada County?
Yes.
So like if counties, if we couldn't make
contracting.
it work?
No, I don't contract outside. We have an agreement with Middleton to take animals that they already own, but it's minimal.
Would it be an impossibility if there couldn't be something arranged for you guys to open an office out here?
We'd be very unlikely at this point in time.
Even with being paid for it by cities?
Yeah, like I said, I scrap with my local communities over these things, and I think what we need to see is that all of these, if these cities fund to the level they need to, then I think you have more choices potentially in time. But, I mean, the West Valley Humane Society, been very impressed over the last basically 11 months or so about how they reorganized, got things back under working again. The veterinarians are working very well. The staff's working very well. I think we're on a positive roll. I think the community supports them. You know, this is not the first time that something like this has happened in a community around the United States. These kind of things happen every year someplace, and folks have to sort of regroup, get back together, and get things rolling. You're essentially working with a new organization. I think if you provided the level of support they need, which is reasonable, they will begin to rebuild their donors and build up those reserves, and then truly be a really good partner for the long-term future. It's going to require some sacrifice initially, I think, but I think it will pay off down the road.
Councilor Stoddard.
Mr. Mayor, you might not be able to answer this question, but under state law, the counties are responsible for animal control, isn't that correct?
I disagree, unfortunately. I don't think there's any statutory requirement. If you actually read the statute, it's basically they can choose to do it, and if they do it, they need to do X, Y, and Z. But a lot of finger pointing has been made towards the county. And when you look at this county and what they've actually provided, even though I think it should be more, it's actually better than most of the other counties in Idaho, frankly. They've stepped up to a much larger degree. Unfortunately for you folks, this tends to fall on the cities, particularly if you want it done the way you'd like the services to be provided. And I've listened to arguments for many years, 25 years, in Ada County about how Ada County should fund more and double taxation and all these arguments. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem to really register with the commissioners all that much. We do okay with them. When I started at IHS, it was a county-run facility. It was a well-run operation. I liked working with that staff, and in the context of the time, I think it was a good operation. It could go back to that. You could come up with a hybrid model where the West Valley Humane Society continues to work, but government takes over certain areas, parts of the operation to help stabilize it and make sure we don't get into a crisis situation. There's lots of different ways to go with this thing. Joint powers agreements.
Okay, I understand. While you're up there, I'd like to ask our city attorney, is that how you interpret the law, that the counties just they're not exactly responsible for that?
Councilor Stoddard, no, my opinion would be different. I think that the counties have an affirmative obligation to respond to dog at large calls where the cities do not.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clear that up. Thank you.
Councilor Allgood, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, sir. You said something earlier about some of the funds you have access to, National Humane Society funding, that it would be higher for the cities if you weren't able to get that funding. Am I understanding you right?
When you contract with a nonprofit, the reason you're doing that, I think, is to get access to leveraging those resources. I like to say that basically, we take what government will provide and we just make it a lot better, basically. We bring in the volunteers, we bring in the donor dollars. Means that instead of a rudimentary operation that just provides the bare essentials, you can get a superb operation that has a really high save rate and does amazing things with the animals and provides educational experiences for the community and lots of other auxiliary functions. But the core services need to be funded by government.
And kind of where I was going was do you have access to funding of any source that West Valley would not have access to, or are you kind of all fishing in the same pond?
We're all fishing in the same pond. And they were very lucky, I think, to get a substantial lifeline from Best Friends Animal Society out of Utah that I don't know what they would have done without that, frankly. I don't know you would have been a real crisis at that point if they hadn't had that.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay, so quick question. So I've heard this, and I just want to see if it is correct or not, is trying to compare, the city of Caldwell, like to City of Meridian, for example. So what I've been told is, like in the City of Meridian, the animal control officers are not city employees.
That's correct.
So
we do enforcement as well. We're deputized by the Ada County Sheriff, so we're basically it's kind of a privatized animal control enforcement entity. So we enforce all of the state statutes related to animals, as well as the city ordinances.
Okay, very good. And that's what I'd heard. I want to make sure, because I know here, so we do have animal control officers
Yes.
on staff. So they are they're the wonderful people that keep getting mentioned that are part of our police department on that. So we do have that funding. And so obviously it is tough to compare apples to apples, because obviously we are paying for animal control officers where perhaps they're not in Meridian.
We do, but we separate that out in our budget presentations, and I'd be happy to provide those to you that set out our sheltering expense versus our enforcement team's expense.
Yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, really do appreciate you being here, answering all those questions.
Yeah,
So,
you're welcome. Thank you.
so much. I believe it's, Chris Hyde. And again, Chris, if you could state your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes as well.
Chris Hyde, 2171 East Thea Drive, Cuna. I've been a volunteer at West Valley since February 2024, so I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly over the last year and a half. I average over 10 hours a week in the shelter these days, and I volunteered more than 500 hours altogether. In my day job, I've built a successful consulting practice out of a career as a senior technology leader focused on turnarounds. I think this combination of experience qualifies me uniquely to offer a few insights. I'll start off by saying that the course change under the leadership team put in place last year has been nothing short of amazing. Processes are improved, staff are more motivated, the shelter is more available for adoptions and reclamations. Despite what I think we can all agree is a chronic lack of resources for the shelter. That said, I'm data-driven, so I want to share a few data points I think are worth considering. The shelter population has consistently and is currently at about 200 animals right now. If each animal gets just 15 minutes of care a day, which is barely enough to keep them alive, That's over 50 hours of care time a day. This speaks to scale, as we've talked about. Ballpark, that's 6 full-time equivalents running around the shelter each day. Consider the cost that this implies as you're looking at options. And that many animals might, to have a reasonable standard of care, require 2 to 3 times this much effort. West Valley last year raised $450,000 in private donations. Allocating this by population, that's $117,000 for the city of Caldwell. It's $1.72 per citizen, if I've done my math right. I think it's fair to say that this is money you would not have going forward if the shelter didn't exist. People tend to think that when they pay their taxes, they're done. I recognize, too, moving beyond the data, which I've learned is important in my career, that there are doubts about the current leadership team and staff. So I want to share just 3 examples among many about who shows up at the shelter each day. To be clear, all of these are voluntary actions that happen because you have a motivated team showing up. One staff member regularly fosters kittens from the shelter, including those who need bottle feeding at all hours of the night to survive. Another regularly fosters special need dogs, giving them a break from the shelter environment. Yet another adopted a dog that was in protective custody at the shelter for over a year and is giving that dog a chance at a normal life. So in summary, the course correction that was needed has happened. There are motivated people in place today who are ready to build on that. Failure to fund the shelter now is penny wise and pound foolish. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that information. So Debbie Johnson indicated to not speak. Is that correct? No. Okay, thank you. Carol Marshall said maybe. Do you know which way you're leaning? Decline. Okay, thank you so much. Lynn Snyder had indicated no as well to speak. Is that correct? Okay. And then also Maria Warner to not speak. Okay, thank you. And Karen Helms did not indicate whether you wish to speak or not. Okay, thank you. And Emily Sullivan had indicated yes to speak. Correct? Or no? Yes? Okay, would you please come forward? It was going to happen sooner or later, so. That is all right. So if you just state your name and address, then you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Emily Sullivan. My address is 4276 North Nuova Avenue, Meridian, Idaho. I help run a nonprofit kitten rescue. It's a foster home-based rescue, so we don't have the luxury of a building and expensive overhead or salaries. So what's been going on at West Valley has greatly affected our rescue. 75% of the cats that we help and the people that we help are from Canyon County, Caldwell, Nampa, further out. And we have worked in the past with West Valley before funding issues happened, and they were incredibly helpful. They helped spay or neuter cats for people in the community. We paid for it. So instead of me getting a salary or any of us getting a salary, we help your community members, and we fix their cats to try to stop cat overpopulation. So West Valley is very important to us, and we hope that all the cities and the county will help make them be able to help the people. Animal welfare is a people welfare issue, and if you could answer our phones every day with people calling up, crying, they're finding dying kittens, and they don't know what to do, and they work, and they don't have time to take care of them. Kittens are highly specialized care, need highly specialized care. So we would appreciate it if the consideration would be to help the shelter out and provide them what they need to be able to further ripple out and help other organizations like ours and people in the community. That's it.
Very well done. Excellent job. Thank you so much. Appreciate those comments. Leanne Yamamoto. And Leanne, if you could state your name and address as well, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Leanne Yamamoto, 8444 Highway 2026, Nampa. I'd like to emphasize what Emily just said. It definitely is a people welfare issue. We find we're helping us in rescue. We are helping people and a community, and it's devastating and breaking work, which Melissa Blackmer from Lake Lowell will be speaking probably after me, and she can address that. But as for me, I support the rescue organizations, but also do some freelancing. So I manage a colony here in Caldwell, and I help Lee Lanigan manage a colony. And she got a cold this morning, so she's going to be submitting a letter to you all. Anyway, so by manage, I mean spay, neuter, and in our cases, we do not return them. And we've been using our own funding, due a lot to a lack of low-cost resources in the shelter, not being able to help. And we have our battles too with, authorities, animal control, and which I won't get into at this point. And I think Lee will probably address that in her letter. I know she's spoken with the mayor on that. Also, we've been involved in clearing out entire colonies, such as at Arthur and Loop. And that was a huge financial burden to Lake Lowell. So I just would also reiterate what Dr. Rosenthal said, and it will take all entities to step up and support and better fund. And I think the county could kick in a lot more than they are too. I think you know this, but they used to fund it over 3 times what they fund now in 2011. And so, I think they're getting off pretty easy on this, and I think should share a little more of that burden. So that's all I have, and I thank you all. I heard you were doing a great job of listening to people at these meetings, so it's much appreciated.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here and taking the time. And you're correct, Melissa is next, Miss Melissa Blackmer. So if you could please come forward, and if you could state your name and address as well, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Melissa Blackmer, and I'm the director of Lake Lowell Animal Rescue. And I did want to start out by saying what I think everybody's saying. The amount of money that the shelter is asking for is completely reasonable. What we do as a small foster-based rescue, just in medical care alone every year, is at least double the $74,000 that they were getting previously. So there's just no way that they would be able to run a shelter with that kind of money. Obviously with the history that we've had with the shelter, I think everybody is wanting transparency and oversight, not only with what the money is being used for, but that we will gain services for that amount of money. So if we do, which I hope that you do, decide to fully fund them, we do need a fully functional Canyon County sheltering system. As far as I know, both myself, Lake Lowell Animal Rescue, and Pet Haven are the only other 2 rescues in Canyon County. And with the shelter not being very functional, the kinds of requests that we are taking in and the significant burden that has been left over for us has been completely untenable. And the sort of suffering that we're looking at, as far as a civilized society, it is important for most citizens will want animals to not suffer, to have a shelter system that can address those issues, both for cats, dogs, or any kind of domestic animals. And I'm sure most everyone is aware, but the kind of cat overpopulation issues that we have in the county is egregious. And we are definitely struggling without a system that can take them in. We're too small. talking about myself, to make much of a dent. We adopt out about 500 animals a year, which is a lot for us, for a small rescue, but it's, we certainly need higher numbers than those. And we're called out to, like Leanne was mentioning, places where we are helping both people and animals. There's 2 houses that we were called into where the humans are no longer able to care for them for medical reasons of themselves. The cats have fleas, ringworm, there's dead cats throughout the house with maggots everywhere. There's a lot of health issues as well. So it's not just people who care about animals that these things are important for. Without a shelter system, if we don't respond, often these houses remain, no one is there to help them, and we certainly can't help them all. So I do ask that we find a way to fund them. It is really essential, and I can speak for myself, just begging you to give us some relief from this.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Quick question, just, so you said something, and in my mind, I thought something about it to make sure it's right. You said a fully functioning shelter.
Correct.
So and I was thinking, does that mean like cats, like they would take cats in again? That would make it a fully
Both.
functioning? Or what what's your definition, I guess, of a fully functioning shelter?
I guess I should say I don't know for sure where we are with it at the moment, but no, for a long time they were not able to take owner surrenders of either cats or dogs. Certainly cats are a huge issue. We're out by Lake Lowell, hence the name, and the overpopulation there, the cats are just everywhere. And there's not a lot of low-cost spay and neuter options. And so people are just dumping them out there in enormous numbers because they don't have options. So cats are certainly a huge issue. Sick and injured ones, but also dogs. The amount of calls that we get for people who are, say, becoming homeless and don't have anywhere for their dogs to go, or aren't able to feed themselves and their pets, and are not able to get them into the shelter because they're full or they don't have enough funding. Not a criticism, but that is a big burden, and we are not able to step up to that.
Very good. Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate you answering that. Okay, so I was saving Nick for last on that, but it looks like we do have sufficient time. So like I mentioned, there was a few that had signed up but that were able to speak at the last ones who wanted to make sure that we got through everybody first on that. So before we do have Nick give his last words and answer, I imagine there'll be a few questions for you on that, so we will go back to those individuals. So first would have been within the city limits, Shannon Netherby, I believe is the correct last name on that. So again, if you could just state your name and address, and then if you could limit it to 3 minutes or less on that. So appreciate you being here again.
Thanks, Mayor. Shannon Netherby, 16066 Sunnyfield Avenue, Caldwell. I volunteered Animal Rescue, Lake Lowell Animal Rescue. I manage the bunnies and birds, but the amount of kittens that we see that just come in is just incredible. We get them from everywhere, and a lot of them are desperate. A lot of them come in really badly injured too. That's one of our biggest problems, and they need the medical care, and it costs, we spend a few $100,000 a year just on medical care for these sick or injured animals, dogs, bunnies, birds, whatever. What I was thinking about since the last time I was here for the last meeting, I had a dog that was coming to my house that it came to my house as a stray, and this is not too long, about a month or a month and a half ago. And my friend, we checked for microchip, didn't have it, took it to the Humane Society. They gave it back to the owner, and then what I was told was that dog has been there 11 times and has not been microchipped. So I could have returned it myself and not burden animal control at all. So it hasn't been microchipped, and it must be a pretty reasonable amount if they're able to get it out 11 times. That's pretty, bad. But the worst part of it was the next day I saw it running down Highway 55 with some kids, and I pulled over. I said, "That's not your dog, is it?" And they're like, "No, it's not. It was the same dog." So again, I took it back and I took it somewhere else. So anyway, but one thing that I've seen through years of volunteering is a spay and neuter clinic always at the local animal shelter. That's always been something that I've been able to rely on in the past. Also, I was part of a vaccine clinic that it can bring, it can be very profitable too. So if you have like even a few times a month, a vaccine clinic can bring in a lot of money to help the Humane Society. But we desperately, desperately need some kind of spay and neuter clinic for cats and dogs by the county. I just looked at the SNP website today. They're not taking any spays for cats right now because their calendar only goes out 60 days. So they're taking male cats but no female. So you can't even get into SNP. And that's typically what the problem people are having is there's places you can get, but then they're not available, they're too full. And then the people that are fortunate can take them to a private vet. But that's just not possible for most people like myself. So, thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Wendy Coombe? Pass. Okay. And Michael or Michelle Glaze? Okay. And if you could state your name and address, and then you have 3 minutes as well.
I was much more prepared last time. Michelle Glaze, 723 Lake Lowell Avenue in Nampa. Last time I came, I talked about some of the big things that I saw that we needed as far as just the problem in general, and I started thinking more into that and more in depth, which I'll go into in a second. But some of the things, just to recap from last time, was the immediate accountability and transparency with West Valley Humane Society. I definitely agree with the funding that they're asking for. I feel like the animals need it. I know on a daily basis I'm fundraising for animals that I'm taking in that have, like, a mama dog I didn't know was pregnant that somebody dumped and beat, and she lies in between the county of, we won't take it, we won't take it. So where does it go? Do I leave it there? We've got a lot of issues with things like that. So I know that all of us, as far as rescuers and shelters and everybody that's trying to fundraise, trying to help these kittens that are losing their eyes, we all need help. We have to have the shelter. Again, we need to rebuild trust through better governance, protect the shelter from future mismanagement. I feel like the people that are in there right now are busting their butt trying to clean up the mess that somebody else made. And still there's no transparency of where money disappeared to. I think the community wants to know that because that could fund what a lot of us are asking, or what they're asking for right now. Address root problems like the overbreeding and exploitation, enforceable welfare laws, which is one that I really am strongly for, creating sustainable shelter funding, foster community ownership, and volunteer engagement. I know there's tons of people, I reach out on Nextdoor every day that want to get more involved. They just don't know how to do it, or they do it in their own way. So the last time I was here, I did not realize that this is coming out of a general budget, which also affects the police. The police budget is involved in that. So to me, that creates a big public safety issue. So I feel like one of the things I thought about is an animal enforcement revenue fund, where we separate that from the general fund that's fed by fines and fees from enforcing existing animal-related laws or stronger ordinances and laws. Hearing that Caldwell's down 30 officers, I think we need to be doing the $250 for leaving a dog in a hot car, $300 for dogs without shelter, food, or water, $100 for unlicensed dogs, $500 or more for backyard breeders, banning the sale of puppies in pet stores unless they come from rescues. These are already violations. We need to enforce them or make them stronger. The revenue from these fines would be split between Caldwell Police Department and West Valley Humane Society in percentages that reflect enforcement and care roles. We would also ask that the city require West Valley to accept dogs recovered by approved rescuers.
Very good. Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here again. Well stated. I believe it's Shanna Jagar. So if you could state your name and address, then you'll have 3 minutes as well.
So my name is Shauna Jagar. I'm at 14920 North Fitzwilliam in Nampa. I was here 2 weeks ago. Hello. Nice to see you guys again. I did send everybody an email. You probably have at least saw that I sent it, but I did want to kind of go over some things that I was unable to say the last time in regards to my proposed solutions. So just to summarize for everybody else who may be watching that didn't see that, we have about 35,000 unfixed cats in this city, just under 1 million in the county. It's a big problem that's not going to go away, even if we decide to fund or defund West Valley. We have to think longer term for infrastructure, reform, that kind of thing. We have to have solutions and a true plan. And so some of the solutions I talked about were spay-neuter clinics, obviously a very big thing. The task force, I really do want to revisit that idea. I think it is a fantastic one. As well as one thing I didn't mention was a voucher fund. That's basically outsourcing spay-neuters to participating veterinary clinics to free up the whole idea of having to have a low-cost spay-neuter clinic in the interim. As well as if West Valley or any shelter that you choose to fund, there needs to be a way to kind of instill outcome-based funding. So like that's making a definition of what they need to be, what benchmarks they need to hit in order to get that funding from you. And a lot of different municipalities around the country have started doing that, and it's been very effective in terms of keeping everybody connected and in the know, as well as, you know, pushing the benchmark forward for animal welfare. But I also, and I might have outdated information, but just to clarify from what I saw, that the money they're asking for, they need it. But my understanding is that they're still only going to operate from a very minimal level that's not restoring any missing services. And so I find that to be frustrating because we're not investing in a new infrastructure that way. We're just keeping the problem the same. The other thing I want to talk about real quick is that I did go to a budget review in Nampa last week. And I was not very optimistic based on the meeting they had previously, but Debbie was talking to me that she was willing to put some extra money forth. Whether or not I think that's going to be what West Valley's asking for, I can't say. But having, you know, the humdrum of Nampa saying boo, no, and then them actually entertaining the idea of funding it is kind of an interesting thought to have in process because that wasn't there 2 weeks ago. So my request would be, regardless, is to start a task force, preferably by the end of July with the determination of whatever a 90-day deliverable would be on that. And, you know, I know Ms. Yamamoto was interested in that as well. And so I was like, she's a great person to do so, and I'm not entirely sure I'm the best person, but I'm a capable person to get that started as well, so.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here again. Okay, Nick, now it is you. So if you could come forward. And so just so everyone knows, Nick is the chair of the West Valley Humane Society Board, if I'm not mistaken, on that. So thank you for being here, making the trip up. We appreciate it. Enjoyed our conversation a few weeks ago on that.
As well. Thank you.
That. Yes, definitely. So with that, we'll actually give you 10 minutes of time, just to give you some more, because I imagine there's going to be a lot of information you're going to want to express, and then there'll be, I'm sure, substantial questions as well after that. So
my feeling is it'll probably be more discussion than anything. So there's only two things I want to do real quick before we get into it. First and foremost, so for context, I am the board president for West Valley. I am also the regional director for the Mountain West region for Best Friends Animal Society. I became involved with the board because of last year and the issues that Dr. Rosenthal mentioned. We did provide a grant of $450,000 to stabilize the organization. That's how we got involved, and as a bit of oversight to that grant, I became involved in the board, and now I have a board president seat. Love that. It's great. But it's no hard work. But no, so first and foremost, I say that because I go to a lot of meetings like this all around the country. I've spent about 16 years in animal welfare from the enforcement side, originally from municipal government. For context, I've seen kind of all sides of it at this point. Rarely do city meetings and town forums go this well. So kudos to the council and to the public all behind me. If you haven't been to ones in other states, it gets interesting. Go south. But you all have done fantastic and getting great public comment. There actually are some really great points that were brought up by the public. Thank you all for doing that. And that was the second part. I wanted to quickly just maybe address one or two of those things that came up during the course of this meeting, and just hopefully that'll probably come into conversation as well. Going from the bottom to the top. So at the last comment regarding task force and oversight and transparency, I could not agree more. That has been the cornerstone of the rebuilding of West Valley Humane Society, has been transparency. It started off simple with, we've redone our website. Anybody can go onto our website now and see any documents we put out, from the public presentations to Caldwell and Ampeta Canyon, to our budget proposals, to our account reviews, which we have had outside sources look at, and we're welcoming any other ones as well. We have spent as much time as we can to foster that openness. It's all there for the public to see. We also did another thing in terms of transparency when we took over the board and essentially rebuilt the organization, as Dr. Rosenthal said, which was redid our bylaws. Those bylaws now include, for each one of our municipal partners, Caldwell, Nampa, Canyon, a spot on the board for a liaison, a representative, somebody from the municipality to sit on that board, not as a voting member, that way there's no conflict of interest, but as somebody who's constantly in the know. Since November, we've had somebody from Canyon County appointed in that role. It has been wildly important, successful, useful, and valuable to us, and I believe Canyon County as well, in terms of that exact thing, transparency. There's no breakdown in communication. It's right there. We talk about it in real time, and we're getting results in real time. It's been incredibly impactful and important. And again, I've said it in a couple other meetings, we really do implore, if we can get everybody on that, it would be fantastic. I think it would do great things for the future of this organization. We have done a couple other things in terms of funding. So another great point was brought up in terms of West Valley generating revenue, generating funds to offset these costs. For clarity, we do. $450,000 grant, that is a uniquely high number in terms of animal welfare nonprofit grants. I speak to that as somebody who writes and signs those grants and pays them out often. That is a large number. You're usually not getting that from an organization. Revenue generation has been incredibly hard since this crisis has hit. We've had to suspend the majority of any of the public services, to the dismay of a lot of people behind me, I'm sure. However, in this last year, thanks to our management team, who are actually here as well, some amazing staff of ours, have been able to relaunch and start those slowly. So for context, in the last month, we've opened up our public clinic services, not for spay neuter, unfortunately. We do not have the bandwidth or the funding for that yet, but we said, hey, we can do vaccines, low-cost vaccine services, rabies, things like that. That, for context, in the last 30 days has generated about $5,500 in revenue. It's not going to fix the problem, but it's also not nothing. We have continued to look for grants. We've continued to partner with outside organizations beyond just locally, like Idaho Humane Society, but nationally, PetSmart Charities, for example, looking at new funding solutions, looking at space solutions, looking at ways in the future, if everything goes well, to continue to find ways to get animals out faster, which saves money, and that's the most important thing. So there are a million other things, though, and 10 minutes is not a lot of time, so I'm going to stop and just let's talk.
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much. And I would just say we appreciate, I think the council would agree with me on that, of the decorum of this meeting. And we would give all of the thanks to the people that are there behind you. Not only this meeting, but the one before. It's been just tremendous getting the feedback in a positive manner with respect, going both ways. And yeah, it's been phenomenal. So yes, welcome to Caldwell. That's how we do it here. So we want to keep that going. So, but yes, again, all the praise goes to the people behind you. They did an amazing job. We really appreciate that. Okay, so with that, we'll jump into some questions. Council Register, I see you're
That's it, just me. Thanks for coming up here. So I do have some questions. I feel like I need a little bit better grasp on the timeline of when, like, what happened before and when this switched over. And part of the reason I'm asking that is because at the last meeting, it sounded like there was still some concerns with the way that the shelter was being run.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to figure out, so there was a group of people that ran it before, something happened, and then now we have a new group of people, and I'm guessing that you looked at the contract and were like, well, we can't do it based on what the other group of people had agreed to, so now we have to raise our prices. Is that correct?
In part, I would say there's definitely some nuggets of accuracy in that. What I can't speak to is what happened before I was here. It would be unfair. It wouldn't be, just. However, I can speak to what I got brought into and what we found, what we saw, and what we've done since then.
And when was that?
So I was first contacted in a professional capacity in June, so basically this time last year, right? I was contacted by the executive director, said, hey, we are in a really rough situation funding-wise. We need, is there any support Best Friends can provide, right? I actually came down the date of an open house they saw that there were some serious, space concerns. There was their staffing was incredibly low because they had to lay off a bunch of staff. Everything that you saw reported on and had discussed since then, it was accurate, right? So the reason we got involved was, again, around June, was we said, hey, and Dr. Rosenthal spoke to it a bit, Idaho Humane Society, Idaho as a state, Canyon County, we couldn't handle, the state wouldn't be able to handle responsibly what has done such a good job of, and that's life-saving if West Valley went away. That would be an influx of 4,000 plus animals back into the system that could not handle it, wasn't set up for it. It would cause a horrible ripple effect, not just through the state, but through the region. Professionally, that was a problem. So that's around what we got involved in and what we saw. Like I said earlier, Best Friends does not provide funding support at that level almost ever. So it had to be a pretty rough situation for us to decide that was worth stepping in at that scale.
Okay,
Right.
so about a year ago then?
About a year ago.
Things changed hands, okay. And then when did you know that you were gonna need more money?
So there was a lot going into that. Around the same time, I want to say more around August, September timeframe, late summer. That's around the time we did contact Idaho Humane Society as well. One of the programs we do with Best Friends is called a Shelter Collaborative Program, or an embed program where we partner groups together and say, hey, you're good at this, help out this group that's not good with that yet, right? Peer-to-peer is much better. We brought them in as well, and the reason I say that was it wasn't just a new board looking at the numbers, it was Idaho Humane Society as well. It was, national nonprofit looking at it. So we all looked at that and looked through contracts. It was a completely new board through that time period as well. There was only 3 to start with, and it got built back up. And everybody looked into it, as well as having an outside accounting firm go through everything as well. And that's how we formulated those numbers. We basically, through the help of Idaho Humane Society, took their formula, more or less, of what they used to look at, their cost and their contracts. I won't speak for them. But that's what we applied, in essence, to this is what it would take to work for West Valley.
Okay, because I believe it was February, or when was it that we had the presentation where we were asked about this?
Debbie,
Or
do you
maybe even later in the year?
remember when, that was when
March?
Tyler, right? I think Tyler came and made the presentation.
Or May?
That was
Okay,
recently,
because I
yeah.
think that's important to give out to the community. Like, we're just finding out about this a couple of months ago at best, right? So it wasn't like something that we had been looped in on last fall. So our city went ahead and made their budgets and things like that. And like Scott said, it's not that it's not necessary. We're just trying to figure out how this works now. At that meeting, when they came and presented that, I specifically asked, can we do like 100,000 now or 200,000? I don't have any authority to really offer that, but out of the question, could we do something like that now and increase next year or in smaller increases? And then we were told at the last meeting that the finance director offered $120,000, and we were all flat out told no. And at that meeting, I think Tyler was his name, he basically said, no, if you don't do 540, we're out the door. So has that changed, or is that still your position?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought it up, and that context is interesting too. So, I think the truth of it is, the only thing that kept West Valley afloat over the last year was 2 lucky bequests that we did not know were coming in, and our contracts, to keep the lights on, and that sizable grant. With the exception of those contracts, which were the smallest portion of that funding, that's all finite, right? So it gets brought up, and for clarity too, we were all also very shocked with these numbers. I by no means expected that. This is one of the largest increases I've seen in my career, going around helping people around the country with this type of thing. This is a tremendous increase. There's no question about that. On my side of that as well. In terms of, trying to find the right way to say this.
I guess the question is there room for negotiation on that
Yeah,
number?
sorry, thank you. I think when I've spoke to a couple since the last meeting, and I've said some version of this every single time. I know that this is not swapping two numbers on an Excel spreadsheet or pulling from this one to that one to make it work. I know that if we request that, it's not going to work. Our request is not setting this city and this community up for failure. That's not the intent. That's not the goal. I'm also a realist. I'm also realistic, right? That we can't just flip a switch and make all this work. We know that the state has made it incredibly hard for cities to get increased tax funds. So yes, per capita is important. Is that even feasible and possible? You can't just add that on top. I know there's challenges like that for the cities right now, 100%. Do I believe that the number is the number of 540? I believe it is. However, I want to be wrong. I also have said that. I am hoping we are wrong. From what we're seeing, I don't think we are, but I'd love, please help us look at the numbers. Let's figure out a way to get there as well. If we find a different one that works, I actually think I might have said something similar to Jeff, who's not here today. We can work with that. What I think is the only road to this working is a combination of many things. And I think that, yes, there are going to have to be just funding increases. I want to give the last woman who spoke, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm horrible with names. You proposed something that I think has incredible value. There are certain things that should be looked at. Ordinances should be looked at. That is a part of the solution. The way we do things like pet retention, pet reunification, there are solutions there. And I think, Mayor, you and I spoke about this in terms of microchipping and return to home and ordinance fees and the fee schedule related to that. That has the ability to not only get animals back home faster, but to decrease the amount of time and therefore the money. And for those that are bad actors that don't comply with the ordinances, a higher fine that is potentially diverted to an animal fund does have value. That's not going to be a full solution either. I think the truth of the matter is we have to figure out a combination of all these things. To your point there, sorry, I'm more of a politician than I realize, so I'll just keep talking on here. But I think that at the end of the day, our goal is to keep Caldwell as a partner. We want to continue to help the community of Caldwell. And if we can find a number that gets all those checks checked off the list, and we both agree that that is achieving that, and it's not causing the other members of the community, the other partners we have, and the organization as a whole, and our staff as a whole, to decline in what they deserve, at the, whether financial cost or individual emotional cost or any of those things. If we're not giving up our mission as a humane society, like we have been doing in many ways by funding government profit services we should be providing, then that's a number I'm okay with.
Okay, thank you. So that leads me to my next question then. If NAMPA does not do this, then what happens? Are we out of luck?
There is, Dr. Rosenthal said a piece of this that is important where, some of these costs are fixed. It's not just about the animals coming in the door, right? So, but there is a piece of it is that there are a large number of animals coming from Nampa, just like there's a large number of animals coming from Caldwell, right? Can we figure out a way to make this work if Nampa doesn't say yes, but Caldwell wants to? Again, I'm too stubborn to fail in many ways, so I will say yes, there is 100% of a way for us to do it, but it's going to be harder. And the same thing if Caldwell says no and Nampa says yes. There's going to be a harder way. I will say the community as a whole, because dogs don't care about boundary lines of city jurisdiction, and the residents who need services don't really care about them either. They just deserve those services. It's going to be really hard to explain that to the community. It's already hard to explain that to some of the smaller cities that we do not have a contract with and that are, not in unincorporated county. That's hard to explain that. We can't provide those services right now because we can only afford this much.
Yeah.
We hate that as an organization. We want that to go back to normal. They deserve that better than that.
So, as I understand it, we're in a contract with you until next year. So, what is the deadline for this decision for us, for other cities? What timeline are you?
It's a fantastic question and a really valid one. So, I think the truth is this: Caldwell is the only municipality that has a multi-year contract with us. Everybody else is on an annual basis. For clarity. Okay. We've already discussed our budgets for next year for Canning County and presented that. Waiting on what that comes out to be. Nampa, we've presented on that as well, and we're a little bit in the same boat there with them. However, the truth is, yeah, we can say the contract with Caldwell is good till 26. Everybody can hold firm to that. However, if we don't exist in 2026, it doesn't really matter what the contract says. So I think the reality is we need to pay a lot more attention to what can we figure out now. Can we at least have ensure the trajectory is toward a solution? You know, the one thing that has been, I don't want to say a frustration, but I think time lost for all of us on this right now has been, we've had these, but we haven't had enough those single dealer conversations where we're actually getting something done and deciding what the actual solution is right now. Right now, we're spending some time figuring out if we should work towards a solution. We need to just figure out if there's a solution on the table, because I think that's where we actually realize whether it's worth going forward.
Well, and I totally agree with
Yeah,
you.
I think we're all on the same page.
But at the first workshop, that's kind of was the question, and the answer was, nope, we're not going to do that. So if the answer had been, maybe that's something we can do, where you do an increase this year and an increase next year and increase, like, I think we wouldn't even be, I think this would be a whole different conversation. It just sounded very cut and dry, like that was
I
it.
completely agree with you, and it's why I'd circle back to my original statement about transparency and having somebody in the know. The version of a task force advisory committee, having somebody at that table, we meet once a month and go through every single thing that, you know, I don't think we'd be in any of this if we had that in place.
Yeah, and I think also the other concern that I've heard is if it's 540 this year, is it 540 next year, or is it 650? And then, you know, are we into $1 million bill? And I think those are the kinds of conversations we have to have, because there, at some point, we have a cap, right? And that's when we may have to look at the police department to put together their own thing or contract with somebody, you know, I don't know how it works, and I don't think anybody has the answer tonight. But
No, the only thing I would challenge is say, you know, how many other budget lines have not changed in the last 10 years?
Right, but I agree that those conversations have to happen about the ordinances and the penalties or fees or whatever it is, that we don't have strong enough ordinances and penalties to put some accountability back on the pet owner. And so I absolutely agree with that. And it's really not even that expensive. Like, I have my dogs are chipped. It was like close to nothing to register them because they were chipped, and it's an investment, but that's we're supposed to invest in our
Costs
animals,
$475 for a
right?
chip. We can often get that subsidized through a corporate sponsorship. We've done that in Las Vegas. We've done it around the country where we can get somebody to pay for that, and we'll happily put them in for free. Because getting one dog home on the first day before they even show up is $30 out the gate saved.
Right,
So
and
we
I
know
think
that saves us money.
that's a fantastic idea, and then you don't have a dog that somebody's picked up 11 times trying to take, you know, to take them wherever.
For clarity, you guys will probably have them soon. I've already provided a draft to Canning County as recommended ordinance updates for Canning County as a whole. I tapped the best friend side for this. I had our legislative attorney working on ordinance updates for Caldwell's NAMP as recommendations. I basically, when I asked that our legislative attorney, I said, hey, what are the potentially the most progressive ordinances we can think of that would solve as much as we can of this problem?
Right.
What can both bring in revenue from the right people, the ones that deserve to pay a little more, right, who are in violations, things of the such, without causing a larger impact, and what can bring animal time in shelter, which costs a lot of money, it's the most money, down as much as possible in a way that maintains public safety, you know, all the important checklist items. I will have those for you soon. I should have them actually by July 1st, so you'll all be getting them in your inbox, hopefully as well. And I'd love to continue that conversation of where could this fit in to make sense, because I think that is one of the most critical parts as well. It's been a long time for some of these ordinances been updated, and lots changed in the animal welfare industry.
Thank you. And then the last question I have, let me see. So we've heard a couple of times now that the county is donating 3 times less than they were in 2011, I think is what they said. So we know that the county maintains the building that you're in for a certain amount of money, or they guarantee a certain amount of money towards that. How much cash do you actually get from the county?
Yeah, good question. So our budget with Canning County is a $300,000 a year contract. $100,000 of that is maintained by county for maintenance of the building on an annual basis. That $100,000 at the end of the calendar year, or financial year, if it is not used, is retained by the county. So if they use $60,000, we're not getting that extra $40,000. However, in our budget proposal to them, we did ask for an increase of that. So we asked, I think, $320,000 320 or 340, I'm sorry, don't quote me.
40, I think.
And we have also asked in that budget proposal to have that remitted back, any remainder being remitted to West Valley Humane Society, which is a way that it did function before, long before us. We're asking them to bring that back.
Okay, so the $100,000 is to use to maintain the building?
Correct.
So essentially you've got 240 if they go for their increase in cash, 100,000 towards the maintenance, so 340, and then the building, or the use of the building for free.
Correct. Plus, there's some, they would call them in kind, they do provide the IT services for our facility, for example, regular facility maintenance on some things. There are a lot of kind of other donations, washers, dryers, that do have a high value to the organization, and I'm sure our managers could speak much more in depth as to what that actually looks like. There are a lot of kind of donated time that I would definitely put value on, because it would cost us a lot more. However, at face value, those numbers are spot on.
I just wanted to make sure that those numbers were right. And I would really like to make sure with our city attorney that, do we get a bill from West Valley? How does that work? Like, how do we keep track of the checks and balances or the accountability for the money?
Council Register, I think you're talking to the wrong appointed official. That would be, Raylan would know that more.
Okay.
It's set up for a monthly billing, but I can't tell you the particulars. That would fall more to the finance.
For some reason, I thought you were looking into some of the records or...
I could tell you, I think it's set up for a monthly invoice, but I don't, that in the contract, but I don't know beyond that, the nuts and bolts of how it's
I'm
actually.
happy to speak to it so it's on record from my perspective at least.
Sure.
Okay. So yeah, that is one of the other things that we did set up immediately when we were on there, was consistency as best as we could, because that was not the case prior to this board. So yeah, it's very straightforward. There's a monthly invoice sent via QuickBooks to the city, to each municipality for contract services. It notes what the service is for and the such. In the contract, there's also a part of the contract that Caldwell requests an accounting of the animals that come in from Caldwell, so we have to provide something to the city. That is something that was not being done well enough, and actually, so that's something that we've been working on to continue to make more efficient, so you guys have a better access to all those numbers. However, we've also been updating and publishing our numbers online as well, so we want some redundancy in place. And I'd prefer to have a world where theoretically all of our systems are at least somewhat integrated. I'd like Caldwell, Canyon, Nampa to have access to see the same information we see on our shelter. That itself would greatly expedite the ability for animals to get home faster. If officers out in the field could look into our system and see what was in the shelter right now. There's a lot of benefits to that. I mentioned it briefly in other conversations and open houses, but we do invoice monthly through QuickBooks. It's automated. I set it up myself.
Okay, well, thank you. And I would be in great support of having conversations with the right people about the numbers, to see if there's a meeting point to at least get this sustained for right now until we get a task force or whatever it is that's going to happen, or fees that go up, or better ordinances and so on and so forth. So I hope that happens.
Councilor Dittenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nick, first of all, thank you for being here. I appreciate everything that you've said. So I'm going to ask you a question, a couple questions, but I want you to keep in mind, I want to focus and come back to this comment you made about hopefully the numbers were wrong. So we'll get to that point eventually, and maybe Mr. Rosenthal can help out if you get yourself in a jam here. You ready? Okay, so we talk about funding, and we're not only talking about dipping from the same pool of animal care advocates, we're talking about dipping in the same pool as the Idaho Hunger Program that's going out of business, and the domestic violence shelter, and all of these are good things to be able to fund. And so corporations are now just going, what do we fund? So with regards to the funding and where you're at, correct me if I'm wrong, don't people like looking at some sort of a thermometer on the wall and going, we're almost there, we've almost turned the corner, we're just a little bit away? How would you explain the relationship with the funding now? Are we a long ways away? Are we a little ways away? Or how are you going to convince me your funding is going to come back?
Yeah. So just for context, if I may. So contextually, are we talking future tense? How close are we to achieving the funding that we're talking about for FY 2026?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I think a lot of that answer is based on the answers you all provide me at the end of the day. That's the truth of that. But I think that what we have seen since like I said, I want to only speak to what I encountered and observed when I first stepped foot into West Valley Humane Society. I don't want to speak to the past that I wasn't here for, right? What I can say is what I've seen steadily happen over the course of the last 11 months has been a sometimes incremental, sometimes quite large jump in terms of not only the relationship-based support, which is the most we can expect when there's a contract to pay it from some of our community partners, our municipal partners, but in terms of the public, I think we can look at Chris Hyde, who spoke earlier, for example, as a statement to what the community is seeing in West Valley. What I won't do is speak to an individual about what they do and contribute, but what I can say is there are individuals in this room who are not employed by West Valley who have provided a hard to really give proper appreciation for not only time but financially as well to this organization. And it's not only one or two people we've seen that from. We've consistently seen our donor base come back. Some of the other individuals who spoke earlier made a fantastic point that when hard times show up in a shelter, West Valley has a history of hard times. From leadership, from financials, all the way around, we see a drop in donors. We see a drop in support because people want to know their money is going to a good cause, that they're supporting the right thing. What we have seen over the course of the last month, and we do this through analytics, we do it through things like the letters of support that you all have unfortunately received 100 so plus in your inboxes for over the last month. We do all these things to gauge that, and what I can say is that we have seen a not 50% increase, not 100% increase. We've seen, in terms of engagement, 300% on a regular basis increase month over month in terms of community support. I know that our revenue this month from donations and pet vaccinations, for example, are over 300% what they were a month ago. That's a little skewed because we didn't have full public services a month ago. We didn't have vaccines all the way in the beginning of the month. But in terms of donations alone, we've seen a constant and regular increase month over month, every single month, of supporting the shelter. That's also gone to larger corporate sponsors. We've seen Treasure Valley Subaru, we've seen Plexus, we've seen numerous organizations at this point. You can actually go on our page, you can go on the website, you can see our partners list and all the individuals that have stepped forward to really support the organization. Have nothing but increased and grown over the last year. And I think that's a fantastic litmus test for the trust that's rebuilding as an organization. And I think that translates to, at the end of the day, are we getting the money that needs to keep in place? What I will say, the last piece of that is, we set a really high expectation and request to the contract partners, of our municipal partners. We've set a higher expectation of ourselves. The $540 that we're asking of Caldwell is just over half of what we're expecting of ourselves, over $900,000 in 2026, larger than West Valley has ever set a budget for in terms of in terms of donations and revenue than any year prior. We wouldn't expect of others what we don't expect of ourselves.
A couple more questions. So just without doing the math here, thinking about what you've asked from the city of Caldwell and what you've asked from the city of Nampa, and of course from Canyon County, it looks like you're somewhere around $1.5 million to get your base. This is your base operation.
Right.
And so I would like to think that Caldwell, is a leader in many aspects. And so if there was an opportunity for the city to be a leader in this aspect, I would surely, be in favor of it. But again, we're dealing with finite amount of dollars in a tough budget year. So with this $1.5 million that you're looking at getting, are you looking for some sort of a flagship city to say, okay, now that Caldwell's, come in the fold, Nampa is, do you think this is a municipality by municipality approach you're taking, or do you really think everybody has to come together to make this work?
I'm glad you asked. Thank you. So I've had the unique circumstance in my personal career of experiencing many different models of animal welfare, animal sheltering, and animal care control, whatever name you want to put on top of it. When I first started, I worked in municipal only. We were a municipal animal shelter. We ran sheltering in-house and field services all in the same organization. It was Orange County in Florida. We brought in at that time over 25,000 animals a year and about 40,000 calls for service every year. That's a lot more than we have here in Cannon County. That model was hard. That model worked, but it cost a lot of money. I won't speak to how much I know, but I started in the early 2000s, and I know we were well into above $5 million at that time at a bare minimum. That model works well if you're able to fund it and make it work. We saw with Cannon County a couple years back, before West Valley came into play, it was expensive for them, and they had to move away from it, right? I've worked in hybrid models where, like West Valley, we have sheltering services that are contracted out, and we have enforcement services, field services that are held by the municipalities or by the county, whomever it may be. And then we have the third service model I look at, which is very similar to the Ada County models, Idaho Humane Society, where everything is essentially privatized, outsourced. What I can tell you, this is my professional opinion, but I would say it might hold a little weight, is this is the most inefficient model that exists, is the one we are in today. There is such a breakdown in communication, both for the public, for the shelter, for the staff, for the officers who have to field questions about the shelter that they don't have to know, and vice versa. There's a constant breakdown and does nothing but slow down progress for the public in getting animals out alive, healthy, safely, whatever the case may be. I will say that model is flawed. I will say the model we're in right now is flawed, and it is probably at some point going to be continuing to live in this situation and gonna fail. We'll have to do something different eventually. There's no doubt about it in my mind. What I believe will work, and it seems to be the climate, and because we have context for it working well, is I think the solution at the end of the day, and this is not in 2026 for clarity, because that's not going to happen, but I think looking at a model like the Ada County model that is a joint service agreement that is completely centralized to a single entity or organization, like it is with Idaho Humane Society. I think a situation like that where all of the laws, ordinances, codes are consistent across the county, so no matter if you move from Caldwell to Nampa, Nampa to Caldwell, you know where to go, you know who to ask, you know your answers are going to get are going to be consistent. And doing that does nothing but help the organization and the community overall. I think if we want to look at that 3-5-year plan, long down the road, whether it's West Valley or not, I would implore every municipal partner to look at that model very closely as possibly the solution, unless everybody's going to get on board and pay county a bunch of money to possibly do it themselves and everybody gets chipped in. But that's going to be expensive for county. It's going to be hard to get them to say yes to. So I think that there's a lot of work to do. I will say on the last piece of that, though, is that because that is something that has to be looked at and we need to get everybody on board, West Valley has already started the process of going into strategic planning. We have brought in an outside firm. We are starting to make contact with partners, municipal partners. This is something I have said to a couple people in conversation, that we want our municipal partners in on that as well. We're not only bringing in our partners, but some of our community leaders, donors, people who have a high stake in what we do, and we want everybody to have a look at this and say, hey, is this the model that works? If we come out of the outside of that and we say, well, it actually doesn't work for West Valley to be that partner, to be that person, somebody else should, we're just happy that result will be there for the community. So we'll be going into that in August, and this is the formal invitation for at least hopefully multiple representatives from each one of our municipalities to join us in those so we can figure out the best road forward.
Couple more questions.
Please, yes.
So with regards to the $1.5 million that you're looking at, do you see that if you get somewhere close to that, or you get the $1.5 million, do you think that your donors and your funding sources will, do you think that will be for lack of better expressions, the wind back in your sails that you need to make West Valley healthy?
Yeah, good question. Confidently, yes. Reason being is that 1.5, that's to provide the services essentially that are here today, right? That we've been paying that $450,000 Best Friends grant into to make up for. We know the costs to do what's being done today, and that's around 1.5. We know that, we also, to the dismay of, like I said, multiple people behind us, agreeably, that as a Humane Society, we haven't been able to provide any of our mission-driven services. Those services that, as Dr. Rosenthal said, make animal welfare better in the communities, right? Those public spay-neuter options, those low-cost options, things that a taxpayer who doesn't care about dogs or cats shouldn't have to pay for, our donors should pay for because they're invested and they care about what's going on. So we haven't been able to do those. We're scraping by. Our poor clinic manager back there is putting in an ungodly amount of hours every week trying to make our clinic services work and give vaccines to the public without nearly enough credit. With the proper funding for the required services, we can start investing into the public services. And the more we do that, the more the community support there is, because the community is seeing the impact that their dollar is having, right? They're seeing the animals spayed and neutered. They're seeing less animals, running loose, hopefully. They're seeing less litters of kittens. Those complaints are hopefully going down as well. There's so many different things that benefit from that. That's what that $900,000 essentially that we're holding ourselves accountable to would go towards. And I would say look at Idaho Humane Society as a model of what that support can do, because they provide a laundry list of services to their community that should be expected, I genuinely believe, but should be supported from a mission-driven organization, which a nonprofit benefit has the ability of doing, and we'd love to do that again.
So one other question, since all conversations here lead or end in cats. So
I was waiting for it.
So we've had some compelling testimony from people who are passionate about the cat issue. And of the cat issue, West Valley is instrumental in 20% of the problem, 30%. How much of the cat problem does West Valley address? Are you providing a substantial amount of services? Or are you just providing the relief that some of these organizations need to make it?
Currently?
Yes.
Almost none. Almost none. West Valley is only providing services for cats that are written into the contracts with our partners. So for example, Caldwell is contracted 99.9% dogs, with the exception of if an officer responds to a call for a sick or injured cat, they can bring that cat into us. Other than that, please correct me if I'm wrong, that's it.
And I was going to ask the same question, because obviously there's an overwhelming amount of people here that are concerned with cats.
Yeah.
So does that money cover the treatment of cats, which the councilman already asked? But.
Right, so the money that currently goes into that would cover, the contract services would cover that cat that comes to the door theoretically, right? To a broader point, I'm sorry, was that to your?
Sure, you're providing no relief now.
Basic, yeah.
But if you got the 1.5 million you needed, you would provide what level of relief to the cat crisis?
Okay, thank you. So, so part of that Humane Society, now actually, I'm sorry, I'm not concise, apparently. One thing I will say is that Idaho is a little unique when we speak about cats. Idaho is one of the few states that I've encountered that has very little, if anything, on a broader scale, written into their ordinances or their codes about cats. Ada County is an exception because Dr. Rosenthal put the effort in to help make sure that was the case. Usually, cats are, like you said, just like dogs, right? The nuisance issues are the same. We need to address those, or the humanitarian reasons, or the animal welfare issues, the support we need to give, their pets, their companions, we need to take care of them. So very rarely do we go into an area where we don't see cats written similarly to dogs in ordinances. So often, those cat services are written into those contract services because that's part of the ordinance. However, that's not the case here. That's okay, that's fine. That actually somewhat helps this conversation about budget a little bit. But what we can provide, what West Valley did, one of the reasons it got into the deficit that it was in was it tried to do everything all at once. This is before us. They provided services like Spay the Mama. They provided owner surrender. They provided food pantry. They provided wait till late. There's a lot of different names for it, but cat services to the community. The way it's written into the contract, that's all nonprofit, supportive, mission-driven services because it's not part of contract services. However, like I said, when that funding is essentially not enough and they're having to put donor funding into both, that's why it went down so fast. Eventually, the well just dried out. That's really what we saw. So yeah, in terms of what could you expect if that 1.5 showed up, you can expect us very quickly to try to find as many ways as possible and as fast as possible to start bringing back what we consider, and I hope everybody on the staff is shaking their head up and down right now, what we consider an expected service for a humane society. That is part of our mission. Cats are part of our mission, dogs are part of our mission, every animal we can help is part of our mission, and we have been doing an injustice to them by not being able to provide those for so long.
Thank you.
Counselor Allgood.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate you coming here. This has been very enlightening.
Thank you.
I've been involved with this a long time, and for a long time, I'm not trying to be negative, but one of the big problems has been a credibility issue with the shelter. And bringing back a sense of credibility to the shelter is extremely important. I mean, I think everybody here is an animal lover and wouldn't mind throwing in another 10 or 20 bucks to make sure their animal shelter happened right, but it's been kind of a mess for a long enough time that they've lost faith in it.
Understandably, yes.
And so what you're doing is really appreciated. I would love for us to set the standard in the valley for how we treat our animals.
Got competition back there, that's fine.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
got that on the record.
But
That's
really,
okay.
really, I would. I really would. Are you having this discussion with our smaller metropolitan area, our smaller cities, Wilder, Homedale, Greenleaf? Not Homedale, they're not in Canyon County, but Parma, are they going to be involved in this?
Kind of a yes and no answer to that question. So, yes, when there's the ability to have communication with them, we are trying to, I'm willing and want to have a conversation with every municipality in this county, because I do genuinely believe that if you live in a county, you should be confident that you have this service. It is a core service, in my opinion, my professional opinion, because I've seen it impact far more than just animals. I see it impact the human aspect quite a bit. So I believe that animal welfare and animal services should be a core service no matter what size your city is, county is, whatever the case may be. That's my personal opinion. Have we been spending the majority of our time, if not almost all of our time, speaking with our current municipal partners because that's where the current fire is? That's true too. So short answer is, are we having conversation with all of them right now? No, we're not. We're having conversations with our current municipal partners because the budgets that we know, we need to start with what we know. And that's this part, right? Because if we don't exist, these are the largest amounts of funding we're getting, right? So if these go away, drastically changes what our future might look like and what we can provide. So in part, but we would like to. We want the entire county to be confident in their services.
Well, the way this county is growing, even our small cities are getting pretty good size these days. I mean, they're having a much bigger impact on our animal population than they did 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. And I think they should be partners.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'd love a situation where there is just a unified, whatever you want to call it, unified district, joint service district, whatever you want to call it. I think that's the model that supports, because like I said, a dog doesn't know borders. And they, it doesn't matter what side they show up on. I've seen plenty of the bad outcomes of areas that don't provide all the way, where, hey, this dog clearly is here. Well, they start dumping it in this city over here because they know it gets service. And that's not fair for the officers that work in Caldwell, for example. If Parma doesn't have it and somebody dumps a dog here because they know it's going to get picked up, that's not fair. It should be completely covered within the county. That's part of that goalpost for me to get to a place where that's the case.
So, tough question for you here.
I love those.
A politically incorrect question.
Even better.
I can't tell you what it is today, but in years past, the shelter advertised themselves as a no-kill shelter.
Correct.
Everything survived. Is that a lot more expensive to operate than a shelter where there's a date where the animal is euthanized if it's been here this long? Is there a cost difference there? Is there, how does that work?
I think that is not politically incorrect at all. I think it's actually quite the opposite, and I'm really happy you asked it. For context and clarity, the missions or the vision statement of my organization, my professional organization, is to save them all. We are a organization, a national organization that supports, and our mission is to help every community achieve no kill as a community, okay? I will actually set really amazing groundwork in that Idaho is poised to be the first state in the entire region of the Mountain West as a state to achieve that. from every community, every organization in the state. That's going to beat everybody in this entire region, which is amazing. Is that more expensive? I think when it's done right, no, I don't think it is. I think it actually can save money. I think the reason is because, and also for context too, when we say no kill does not mean 100%. That's a fallacy. That is untruth, because the reality is animals come in hit by car, that come in mangled, that come in incredibly sick, past their. So no kill is actually a benchmark of 90% or more animals making it out of a shelter healthy and alive, because that's the realistic expectation when you work with municipalities who have to bring in who knows what, everything that shows up at their door, right? So for context, that's not 100%. Do I think it costs more money? I think if you do it incorrectly, I think it can cost more money. We see organizations that don't do it well, that would do things like we call warehousing in some terms, where they keep an animal no matter what, right, for as long as they need to be, and it costs money. We saw a little bit of that here before, just for complete honesty. We saw animals staying, we use length of stay as a great barometer in sheltering, how many days an animal has to stay in care before it makes it out of the shelter alive or deceased, doesn't matter. That's that length of stay. We saw a length of stay, and I don't know it offhand, but I will say it was well past a month, well past sometimes 2 for many animals, right? That costs too much money. When we're talking $30 a day plus to care for an animal, it only goes up the longer they stay in shelter because they need more. They decline, health-wise or mentally or whatever. It'll cost more money to keep them there healthily. However, what I can say is, since we've been here, to the credit of the amazing staff back there, we've seen the length of stay at West Valley Humane Society go down to often less than 8 days. Almost up to a week, which is far and beyond what I would ever expect of an organization within less than a year. It's phenomenal work they've done, to their credit, not mine. I would say that West Valley, the way it's operating now, though it can do better, because we should always aim to do better, right? We can do more, is operating in a no-kill model that is efficient, that is effective, and is not at a detriment to municipalities and your budget line.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Councilor Stott, or Councilor Stoddard.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to say it was refreshing to hear your opinion of how this thing should run. The gentleman we had last time, as some of the councilors said, it was take it or leave it, and that sure doesn't fit well with me at all. But I'd like to clear some of the misinformation that was presented at the last meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong. First of all, we were told that the society was in negotiations with us since last November, and of course, we councilors didn't hear about that until here a month or so ago. That, in fact, was not correct. I talked to our finance director today, and she said it really didn't start until February of this year. Okay. So it wasn't last November. The costs per person, as far as taxpayers are concerned, again, we're responsible taxpayers, obviously. And I know there's been a lot of numbers flushed around. Last time was $1 per person. They'd be happy to pay. And tonight, I think Mrs. Warwick said $7 per person. We have to keep in mind, too, the kiddos don't pay taxes, just the adults. So it's a lot more than the $7. So you have to keep that in mind, too. We asked the chief to put together some numbers for us from last time, exactly how many animals did Caldwell contribute to the Humane Society as far as care. And it turns out with the $540,000, assuming that we gave you that, it came to $10,800 per animal. You think that would set with the taxpayers? I don't think so.
If I can respond?
Sure.
Okay. So I understand where that number comes from. However, I want to provide clarity on that as well. Currently, the money that's being provided to West Valley Humane Society, the contractual, funding that's being provided, is to provide what's in the contract, right? So within the contract, as it currently reads, and don't quote me, I know I'll be off in some degree, but we are contracted to take in, yes, animals that come from animal control, right? Dogs or cats, wildlife to some degree, right? Whatever context they deem appropriate, more or less, we'll accept. There's often few outliers from that. But that's not the end of the day. I would venture, and I may be wrong, but are those numbers that were provided based on what animal control from the field brought to our organization?
Yes.
Okay, so perfect. That is a very important part of that number, but it's not the entire number. So that money that's being provided by contract right now is, yes, 100% for that. But it's also, because our contract says, we also take from the public, stray X, Y, Z. So that total number is, it's not $10,000 per dog. I'm sorry, that is incorrect. Respectfully, we are looking at not just what animal control brings in, we're looking at what the community is allowed to bring us as well. And that is not everything. That is not cats, right? That is not owner surrenders in most cases. We don't take those. That's not part of community contract funding. Strays, sick or injured, things like that effect. And that's where we're seeing this number from. So that is the basis of our decision, unfortunately. It's not, that's an important part of it, but it's not the entire part of it.
Okay.
And just so we're clear, that's about $3,400 an animal if we account for all the ones, because you average about 1,100 intakes from the city a year, not from the police department. We average about 300 to 350 a year.
Okay. Perhaps, I won't speak to it. You guys had the number guy last time, you get the politics guy this time, I guess, so.
You're good.
But we can, that goes to my original thing, we said, hopefully I'm wrong. I want to dig in as a unified group to know and have everybody on the same page of exactly what you're getting for your dollar. At the end of the day, that's what's important. Otherwise, I'm not in the mood to help keep an organization together that's constantly bickering and fighting outside of the norms that you expect within, a contractor relationship in a municipality. It's not going to work. So we need to be on the same page together as to what that expectation is.
In the past, sorry for the interruption. In the past, it was set up that, and this is going way back, it was set up that you bring X amount of animals in, this is what it costs, and this is what we're going to charge you per city. So that's the way it was set up in the past.
No, and a lot of people will quickly try to say, well, why can't we charge per animal? It may work with less than 100 because you know exactly what that's costing you. It's really easy to pinpoint what that cost is, right?
Yeah.
At this scale, it's just not, it just won't work.
Okay. Another item, last time we were, again, challenging the numbers on the costs, and we asked for a balance sheet or even a budget. Didn't have one. And it's beyond me that a business operates without a balance sheet or a budget. I don't know if they refused to give it to us, but we were told no. And I'll use, for example, some of the city-owned property, the Vet Hall, Veterans Memorial Hall, which I'm one of the board members, liaisons. They produce a balance sheet every month to us and a budget before we go into our budget cycle. So we, as a council member and a taxpayer representative, I would expect that from you folks too, and a commitment that you'll do that.
I would as well, which I'm going to ask for clarity. This was the last meeting, the initial time when the initial presentation was brought.
Yeah.
Surprising me because there was a budget, budget documentation on that. We actually have that and provided that. We actually provided also in our November open house document that we provided to all of our partners, and that was our proposed budget for 25. We've had a completely fleshed out budget for 26 as well that we've been provided. It's actually publicly, we don't, not just municipality based or privately, it's actually available publicly on our website. You can see it on there. So I'm a little surprised by that statement, if I'm being honest, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to solve it, and it's a very easy one to solve.
Okay.
So, yeah, no, we have had, we actually had Idaho Humane Society help support that. That was looked at in a couple different ways.
So your commitment is you'll supply a balance sheet and a budget, no problem.
100%. We actually have published online right now. We had a third-party review, do an entire acconing review of the prior years on there. That's all there as well, 100%.
Okay. Talk about these other municipalities, like, the Parmas, the Wilders, and all that. Being on the, I was on the Valley Rapid Transit District Board for a while, and it just seemed like Caldwell and Napa were supplying a lot of the services that they should have paid for too, that they didn't. So Councilor Allgood had a good point. What are you going to do about these other municipalities? And I think that has to be part of your program, a mandatory thing, because they have to pay for their fair share too. And I think there's a lot of times, and I think the chief will back me up on that, those people sometimes will come to town, Caldwell, drop the dogs or cats off they don't want, and Caldwell gets charged for it. So we need to include all those people in the Canyon County area.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm going to be very transparent in my statement that you are not falling on a deaf ear, but you're also not talking necessarily the primary person who's going to solve that. That at the end of the day, this is a government-to-government agreement. That is something that municipalities, we need to all come together for. We're happy to be part of it and facilitate it.
Yeah.
You guys got to work internally a little bit on that though too, because it's true. I agree with you. For clarity, we're not giving those services to Parma because that is exactly the point. We're not going to use your money for that.
Yeah. And the young lady is still in the back of the room there that presented some of the fees that should be
Yes.
charged. And as far as responsibility as a city in the county, we need to look at that ourselves, because I think that, I can't speak for the officers in the back there that do the job, but we really need to take a close look at those fees and see whether they're applicable to what we're doing and make sure that they're correct. And I don't know what these other cities are paying, but we need to take a close look at that too. Having been in the potato business negotiating contracts in my prior life, you know, it's tough when you have to look at costs from both sides. I understand that. I looked at land costs for potato growers, their taxes, the interest they have to pay, equipment costs, where they're up or down, fertilizer, chemicals, application fees and all that. Then I go to the corporate office and I listen to the sales and marketing folks. I listen to the chief finance officer, and then I listen to the family, what kind of profit they want to make. So that all has to be tied together, and I don't see your organization being any different than that. A lot of times we won't agree. Sales and marketing might tell me our sales are way down, we can't pay this kind of money, and the other side, fertilizer, chemical prices are up, we can't afford not to have this kind of money. People really need to look at that and make sure
You're ringing
that,
true, yeah.
and that transparency is very important. Councilor Alwood brought that up too. I mean, in the other meeting that we had, there was no transparency at all. Just, this is what it is, take it or leave it, and that's it. I mean, that was a terrible meeting as far as I'm concerned. So unless you have any questions, I'm ready to turn it over to Mr. Doty. Thank you.
Okay.
I just have closing comments.
Yeah. Yeah, no, go right ahead.
All right, so there's a couple things to consider, and I want the audience to know, especially those that are Caldwell taxpayers. House Bill 389, and I won't go into the full detail about that, but it certainly makes our state legislature look very good, because they get to say that they cut your taxes, which they did, which now seems to be causing them a little bit of a problem, but it has really hamstrung your city government, which means now we have to ask you to raise your taxes, or we have to raise it ourselves. So they did a very good job of protecting themselves down at the state capitol, but pushed it all on us. So I just want people, if you haven't researched 389, that is some of our issue here. All of this coming together all at once. 389, the huge raise in that, more requested fees from the county. Other than this, hundreds of thousands of dollars and other fees going up. So I just want everybody to be aware of that. I am interested in your laws, because I've submitted 3 to Oscar, our city attorney, already from the last meeting. And so maybe we can combine those and massage those together.
I would love to do that. That's great.
And work that out. The issue with fines, based on my law enforcement career of almost 30 years, is fines are great on paper. They make us all feel good.
Do you get them?
The issue is, can you get them? And then what is the issue with that? So if it's a civil fine, then you end up spending hours and hours, because courts won't hear these cases. They just won't. It clogs up their dockets. They won't hear it. They won't even hear parking tickets, so they're not probably going to hear the dogs, right? Or the cats. They're not going to hear them. They're going to want that to go to civil. And so to collect civil fines, then of course, that's more attorneys, people that don't pay, putting liens on their properties, if they have them, liens on their houses. And a lot of these animals come from people that won't even pay for a $5 chip. So we can fine you $1,000, but it does no good except create a bunch of paperwork and then a bunch of tax liens on property they typically don't own anyway, which means you can't put a lien on anything. In regards to the contract, I'm interested, we did a FOIA request with the county, and we're under the understanding that there is no contract between West Valley and the county. Is that correct?
Not to my knowledge.
Oscar, can you tell us what the date is? So and my point with this is I have a tough time giving any money to an entity that doesn't have a contract right to use the county facility. So what information did we get? Would you mind sharing that with the audience?
Councilor Doty, we did a public records request to Canyon County for their the contracts with West Valley Humane Society for the last 5 years. And the last contract that was provided to us in that public record request was for fiscal year 23-24. So the county, to the public records request, did not provide any current contracts, only for 23-24.
I'm surprised by that statement. However, what I can say is that I know unequivocally that First off, we came into a very interesting situation and conversation. I am not aware.
I'm not
of-
blaming you for
Oh, I
it
know.
at all.
I believe in full transparency. It's
Yeah.
interesting
So I
conversation.
want our
We did
citizens
review
out here to
everything.
know, if we don't have a contract with you and we're not even guaranteed you're gonna
Right.
be there, it's awfully hard for me to write a big check to you. If that
That's
i-
understandable,
if- okay.
100%.
So if you find that or get that.
Yeah.
And then kind of, Diana, Council Register's question, you said you did the QuickBooks, because I think some of the financial documents we got from the county don't account for 300,000 going to you. So and I think that's some of the confusion you're seeing up here. So have you seen the $300,000 deposited into your accounts from the county?
We don't, in terms of, we don't get a lump sum, if that's what you're asking. I'm sorry. for
Even if
clarity.
it's monthly, are you seeing a monthly check, a weekly check, a daily check? Are you seeing funds come from the county? Because when we asked for that request, it's not in the documents they provided. Only the 100
I won't
grand.
speak for Canyon County. I will say that, and their managers in the back of the room, we actually brought in, we removed a lot of positions. The only position we have brought back in, other than leadership, has been accounting. We brought in a bookkeeper. That's the only thing we have done. Her entire job is making sure those payments do come in. I can say that we are getting money from each one of our partners.
Would
It's
you
the
mind
town's part of
confirming
that.
that then and sending that to our
I will 100%
our
do
attorney?
that for
Because
you.
right now, the county, it is my understanding
Yeah.
that they have not provided that they're paying
Okay.
any money other than the 100,000, which is of course causing
maintenance
some
funds.
issues, right? Because we only think they're paying 100,000, then they get to keep whatever they don't spend. So if they are providing further checks up to 300,000 more, we'd certainly like to see proof of that.
Yeah, so all we should see on the books, just for clarity, there should be a documentation of $200,000 per year coming to West Valley from Canyon County. So 200, just for clarity.
Yeah, so
right?
if you have it,
Okay.
maybe you could provide it.
I happily, 100%, we will make sure you get that.
But do you see what the issue
Oh,
is?
I 100% do.
Yeah,
I can very much understand that. Yeah.
Because we talked a lot about partnerships, right? Partnerships. This coming to the table and getting these other 6 cities and all of us in the same room together it's not going to get accomplished by, and I don't mean that it can't be, within the time that we have to make a decision to pass a city budget. Right?
We're very aware of that,
Okay.
unfortunately.
And I also agree with Oscar's analysis of the law. It is the county sheriff's responsibility. I was a deputy sheriff many, many years ago to take care of the loose dogs. So in the end, it is the county's responsibility if push comes to shove. And then, unfortunately, the events of this weekend just shows how important it is to have our law enforcement and our firefighters well taken care of. And so again, we're deciding, I'm not saying both aren't important, I'm not saying dogs aren't important, cats aren't important, but if you put me between a rock and a hard place and I have to support our police and fire, that's who I'm going to support with the money. Does that make sense?
It does, but is it okay if I make a quick response? to that?
Let me just finish up
Please,
here,
yeah, go ahead.
because
I don't-
you
I know
talk a
we have
long
taken so
time
much
when you
time.
answer a
This is not
question,
past
so
10
let me
minutes.
let me get through mine. Let me get through
Optimistic, but
mine.
That's fine.
And then, for such a big issue, just for our citizens of Caldwell, I would have liked to see a lot more community members. We have less than 0.5% of our population, yes, some are children, that's correct, to come out and support this cause. It would certainly make an easier decision for us, but with such a low turnout, and I'm sure it's very important to many more people that aren't here, and everybody has lives and things, but it doesn't seem to collect quite a group of people that I thought for how significant this issue is. I think our police chief I won't speak for him, he's sitting right there, but I have talked with him that we do need a contingency plan, because I don't believe Napa, I've heard about their budget numbers and coming out, I don't think they're gonna come anywhere close to what you're requesting for them either. And so we do need to have a contingency plan, so I appreciate our chief putting that in place, because we may have no option but to go with the Middleton model depending on what takes place with this. So I just want our citizens to know that. We still do have a contract in place with you for 1 more year. So,
As long as we're there.
okay, it was already stated, so I'm not gonna beat up on that very much. And then, again, I'm just gonna close with this. House Bill 389 and many others, so, thank you.
Yep, for sure. Councilor Register?
Yeah,
Follow up?
I just have a couple of closing things too. But first, Oscar, with what Councilor Doty was talking about with the, well, I guess you were talking about the money coming in from county. Do you have any further information on that at all? Like, he said that they weren't getting, you said they were not, can you rephrase
Just to
that?
clarify, the only, and I prefaced it with all I know of. So
Yeah.
the only thing I know of is they've accounted for the spending of the $100,000
But
for
not the
the
actual
maintenance
cash.
that I'm aware of.
Right. Do you know anything about that?
I'm not aware of actual proof of the payments. We did get a spreadsheet from the county that had the numbers in it for payments.
To reach the 200,000?
I wasn't able to do the math on them. It just, we did get some spreadsheets.
Okay, well, I guess all anybody's saying is just a general fairness, right, of who's paying what and making sure that that's happening. And I'd like to see those conversations with the smaller municipalities as well, like Councilor Allgood said. I don't think, like you said early on, dogs don't know any borders, right? And then I have some questions that I'll email to finance, including like, what exactly is the impact to the taxpayer? If we do this, do we have the money right now? Is this something that has to wait? How do we start these discussions? And I appreciate you taking the lead on that and maybe getting in touch with finance. I think she's out of town right now, but getting in touch with the mayor or whoever it is that you need to have these conversations with about possibly coming up with a negotiated number so that it doesn't just fall right now. And I also appreciate having a contingency plan. I think that's really important in case we come up with a number that maybe can't take care of all the needs, that we can at least maybe take care of some of the needs on the city side, like a hybrid, like they were talking about. And then also, just really quickly, the Lake Lowell Animal Rescue, is that lady still here? Is she? Oh, do you do your social media? Oh, I love it. If you haven't seen it, you gotta go. I follow it. I love it. She has all the dogs like doing, well, I saw a couple where I thought the dog was like doing the talking in the post. They're super cute, and so I think that if you need any social media help, that's the lady to go to right there. It's a great Facebook page.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other questions or comments from council members? Okay, very good.
May I
Yes, please.
Just to touch on two things that actually to me are very important just to speak to. Because everything is closed, I'm not trying to say anything who said last, I just wanted to I want to agree formally with what you're saying about public safety. I believe that, I say this as a former officer, for context, animal services, animal control is not just picking up loose puppies and kittens. I know the officers behind me know that very well. We are not saying, and West Valley has never said, and I know that this is for clarity of any misinformation or miscommunication that's come out in media. West Valley does not want law enforcement, fire, or anything like that to be targeted, cut, anything of that fact. That is contradictory to one of the core values of animal welfare, which is taking care of the human aspect of it as well, and the safety piece of that. Furthermore, those officers back there are law enforcement. They are part of the police department. And one of the things I worry about, I say this, if I look ahead with, if everything goes wrong, here's what I see, here's what I worry about, is that the reason only 40, 60 dogs that are dangerous dogs or whatever the case may be are brought in from animal control is because we're able to take care of a lot of it before it goes bad. The reason most bites happen to people is because a problem persists time and time again until it eventually escalates and something goes wrong. Somebody gets bit because a dog runs loose too much and it loses its control where its property line is. My only concern, my cautionary tale to city, no matter what happens, is take that into account, be ready to handle it, essentially. If you don't have a place where your community can take animals reliably, quickly, safely, and you don't want to overburden your officers because eventually it'll only overflow from your 2 animal control officers to patrol officers and so on and so forth, and your dispatch that don't get calls through enough because they're dealing with taking animal calls, et cetera. It only causes more of a risk, and it's a cautionary tale because I've seen it go bad in my other professions in my career. The more dogs that run loose, the less that make the way into the shelter, the more likely you are for bites and traumatic instances to occur. And I just say that again as a cautionary tale. The last piece on that cautionary tale is, if it all goes wrong, and I say this as a realist, but not hoping for negative. The one thing our contract does not have in place right now is a transition. We have nothing in our contract that addresses when that contract ends and what happens to the animals that are yours but in our care still, things to that effect. If that contract ends and we don't have a transition plan in effect, it's going to cause a lot of headache. There's going to be a lot of people's animals, and by the way, that is their property, up in the air in a giant gray area. That's going to cause a lot of strain on Caldwell. So at a bare minimum, I recommend as we look at a solution to look at a bare minimum an amendment that creates some version of a safety net for transition no matter what way we go. And that goes to even if we find funding, all future contracts need to have that. Thank you.
Yes, for sure. I think one.
I had one, actually a question for you. And you can stay there, though, because he's going to want to talk to you. But I just wanted to ask this before I forget. At one of the budget meetings that we had, we talked about maybe putting some projects on hold to achieve where we wanted to be in the budget. Specifically, I think it was for the police department, or I can't remember. Anyway, we were talking about that as an option of just maybe putting a project on hold and then reallocating that money. And so it's come up a couple of times. I've heard it about the quiet zone, the railroad quiet zone. Is that the same fund where we could, if that project was on hold or wasn't approved, that money could be used towards the shelter?
So, and obviously Raylene is not here, but there's specific buckets that you can and cannot take that money from. Enterprise funds, like with our sewer, water, you cannot take money from there to try to offset a general fund expense like this is. So in regards to the quiet zone, and as you remember when we, obviously the budget still to be determined by the council. So there are options in there for a one-time expenditure. So you do want to be cautious of using one-time money for what could be an ongoing expense. But you do have the ability, the council does have the ability to, as we discussed, there was a surplus in the budget from this past year of approximately, if I remember correctly, $3.8 million. And that was largely due to higher interest than we expected on the cash accounts that we have that came in that regard. So there was an increase to our fund balance of approximately $3.8 million. We want to keep our fund balance at a healthy number, not too low, but also not too high. And so there was proposals to the council of creating some different options of utilizing that fund balance to keep us at a healthy overall fund balance level. If you remember correct, that was what it appeared at the time, and again, not yet approved by council, was creating a building contingency fund, which I think is very important that we put that in there and putting that money into that building contingency fund to build up over time so we can, whether it's building a completely new building or continuing to improve the buildings that we have that need work on it. So that money is available and that could be used, that's fund balance, so that could be used for a one-time expense to cover the additional cost. If I believe correct, earmarked in the budget is $100,000 on that, so whatever additional you could take from that. But again, just being cautionary that if you continue to use money from a one-time fund, eventually it's going to run out. So it would provide time, I guess, to find potential solutions, but you could utilize that for a one-time expense if the council,
Right.
majority of the council decided
I guess
on
I was
that.
just curious about that because we keep hearing about all the property taxes that are going to catch up when the growth starts, or when they start building, I should say. So it may be one of those things where maybe there's some relief when that property tax comes in 5 years or whatever it is. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I guess those are the conversations. And I just would really appreciate having a conversation about maybe a graduated number to start a little bit lower where we're more comfortable and then start having those. I feel like, I guess I don't understand like what the deadline is, right? Like because we have to approve the budget like they said. So, so I guess those are conversations we need to have been pretty quickly, right? Where if you could start with 120,000 and then we decide whatever's going to happen next year and the year after that to get to where we all need to be, and do we do a contingency plan with the police department and things like that, because I think it's important. I just don't, I think everybody needs to work together to try to get to that same place.
Could not agree with you more. And I think that is 100% the next step. We can, like I said at the beginning, we can have a lot of progress in a 30-minute conversation just over the phone to start talking about what we can do, and
Yeah.
I think that's
And
what we
one
can
thing I
start looking
really appreciate about this conversation is myself and a lot of community members, I don't think we knew that there was a change in leadership. And so I think that some of the pushback you might be hearing from the community is I don't think they knew that there was this break. That's why I was asking about the timeline, because some of the stuff that I've read always seems to go back to, well, West Valley's had this problem, they've had that problem, problem. This has happened. Where what you're saying is that it's not the same leadership, it's not the same group, you've had a change in management, and so on. So now you're kind of asking for the community to put their trust back in
And
you.
it's a very hard thing to ask.
Yes,
And we,
yes.
that's why we expect the scrutiny. We're not shy of that.
Well, I think that's
appreciate
another
it.
reason, though, why a graduated number might be better. Because if we go back to the community and say, well, we're gonna, we found $500,000 of your taxpayer money and we're gonna go do it, you're still gonna have a whole big part of the community that's like, why are you giving money to a group that's already proven that they can't manage it? What you're saying is it's a new group, right? So let's say we do 120, like finance said, and then over the first year, you prove to us that you can manage it. We get the bills, we get the invoices, we get the transparency, we get all the stuff that we've been asking for, and then we know we can move on.
What matters to me at the end of the day are two things. Everybody in the back of that room and everybody else on our staff have a job throughout the year that they can rely on comfortably, confidently. That's been a huge issue for West Valley as well. They deserve a lot of trust to build back in us as well, because a lot of staff were lost last year.
Yeah.
They deserve to be confident and comfortable in their job. Same thing for the animals. The community members that are able to bring us animals, they deserve to know that's going to be there for them. Those are the most important two things to me, other than taking care of the animals and fulfilling our mission. The only thing that worries me is if a number's too low, do I put that at risk?
Well, I
Now,
guess
but-
you won't know
but-
until
well,
NAMPA
exactly.
responds and whether or not Canyon County comes up with some money.
100%. So that's why I just completely agree with you for clarity. I think that the stage we have to go into next is where we start figuring out how that all works collectively, so there is no questions. I mean, no offense to any group. I am not answering questions for Canyon County. I don't work for them. They don't work for me. We're their contractor, just like you. They just give us a building. I 100% agree, as the city government side, to investigate and figure out the solution that works in that regard. That's, it feels a little off to try to be expected almost to answer for them.
I don't think anybody's asking you to.
Okay.
It's a matter of getting the numbers so we can do the addition, right? So that we
100%.
say, this is what we're doing, this is what NAMP's doing, this is what Canyon County doing, here's your balance,
And I
right?
think
Or
that's
here's
the
your
benefit
budget.
of the joint service agreement,
Can-
100%. Sorry to
Right,
interrupt.
can you manage on this amount instead of this amount? Even if it's just for the first year, what do we do? Are there services that can be cut back? Are there other I don't,
Much at this point,
or
but
there
yeah, I
are
hear what you're
programs or
saying.
whatever it is, and then we start building it back up, because it's been unfortunate that all these things have happened, that they have brought us here, but we can't put it all on the back of the taxpayer to build it back up, right? We have to, you guys have to earn trust too, right? So there's all of that. We have to ask our taxpayers to give more money. You guys have to build the trust back up within your organization to get your grants and all the stuff that you do on your side. And I think a collaborative effort might make it work, but it might take a minute.
I don't disagree. And the hardest part is from A to Z and figuring out everything in between, and that's where we are 100%.
Yeah. Thanks.
Very good. So I just have really quick comments, and then just to thank you again for being here. So the one thing that I would like for you, and again, I don't get a vote. The mayor does not vote on the budget or these things. That is up to the council. But one thing that I think would be good to look at is the number coming from each entity, from the city of Caldwell, city of Nampa, Canyon County. Because I know that it's based off of what the intakes from each of those jurisdictions.
Okay.
It's difficult to track that because you don't know where was this dog actually picked up, being dropped off. A lot of times people say Caldwell, and Caldwell has a couple of zip codes. 83607 is massive, and a lot of people live in that zip code, even though it's right next to Middleton or even on south of Lake Lowell, that maybe shows up as Caldwell. We even have Caldwell citizens that have Nampa addresses, so even Nampa may be getting dinged more than they are. So I think it would be good to just have a flat where everybody is even on it, depending on their population, not on what we think the intakes are. I know I was looking at the numbers, and it's tough also to pick a year because it fluctuates. Like I was looking at Canyon County, they went from 15% of the intakes to just under 30% in 1 year. That's a double. So if you picked 1 year over the other, that's a huge change. For example, last year they had 15% more intakes than Caldwell, but they're being charged 40% less. And so I think that's one thing I would like to look at, or for you all to look at and consider, is instead of trying to base it off of these numbers, which can be very difficult to track, it's a flat number depending on the number of residents, whether it's $6.50 per resident, and Caldwell, Nampa, Canyon County each pay that same amount, I think would be great. That would help. I just ran some very quick numbers. It would help Caldwell out. Nampa would stay about the same. We would drop about 90,000, but then Canyon County would raise about 150,000. So obviously it's going to be a tough sell to them, but I think it's more fair along that. So I think that would be good to look at just as a possibility on that would be one thing on to
We're
take
happy
into
to look at
consideration.
anything, as long as it's a we. I think that's the end of the day. If it's us going back and playing playing telephone from one group to another, it's gonna be a long time till we get there. I think if it's a we, we'll be able to get to some type of solution though.
Yeah, and just to kind of end, just again to thank you for coming up here to just educate us. We appreciate that, and for everyone that is here, again, I'll echo the sentiments that you made before, that this is a model meeting of the way that the citizens were, the input that was given, the questions that were asked. We really appreciate just the respect all around, and we wish you could have more meetings like this in that regards. But again, we do want to thank you for taking the time, the board members, Dr. Rosenthal coming in as well and providing the input and what you do, and everybody else that's out there providing those services. And to all of you volunteers that are out there working so tirelessly, doing such amazing things, thank you for what you do. We think we're in a pickle now. I can only imagine how bad of a situation it would be if we did not have each and every one of you donating so much of your time and resources to help take care of this problem as well. So thank you again for that, and thank you to everyone for being here this evening. Obviously, there's still more work to do, but we do appreciate the input and take that into consideration. So thank you so much.
For the sake of the record, because we talked about documentation, if I can just say so it's recorded. If anybody is curious, it's wvhs.pet/financials. That's the document library. Everything we have that's publicly provided is there. So that way it's on record. Everybody can find it super simply.
Yep,
Thank you
very
all
good.
so much for your time. I appreciate
Yes,
it.
thank you so
Take
much.
care.
Appreciate you being here. That concludes our meeting. Thank you so much.